Chapter 4:15. Spear Parsi was silent for a while before she said, "Is this a threat or an invitation?" "Of course it's an invitation." Nightingale spread out her hands and said, "His Highness doesn't approve of using coercion to order any witch around. In fact, I hate that method too." "Then I refuse," Spear said without hesitation. "If he really needs my help, he can bring the witches to Fallen Dragon Ridge and visit me with noble etiquette. He won't send someone to sneak into my castle. Of course, if it attracts the attention of the church, I can't guarantee the witches' safety." This answer was not out of Nightingale's expectation. In fact, there were only two ways to make a stranger agree to a difficult request: coercion and temptation. She didn't want to use the former, and she didn't want to use the latter. Marquis Parsi was already the lord of a city, and above her was the realm guardian. His Highness not only didn't want to grant her a title, but also planned to take back all the nobles' power, which was called centralization. So in other words, if she worked for His Highness, her status would be reduced in the eyes of the traditional nobles. As for following Prince Roland to create a new world and fight against the terrible enemies in the Battle of Divine Will, she probably wouldn't believe it even if Roland told her. "I see." Nightingale curled her lips and said, "Then I'll take my leave." "Wait." Spear looked very surprised. "That's it? I was responsible for delivering His Highness' message. Now that you know and have given me a reply, the task is naturally completed." She grinned. "Otherwise, would you like me to tie you up and bring you back? How do you know my ability is magic channel?" The Marquis hesitated. "Have you been in contact with the witches who plan to go to the Fjords Islands?" "You guessed right. The leader of the witches, Lady Tilly Wimbledon, is now in Border Town, fighting against the months of demons with her brother." Nightingale shrugged. "His Highness also learned about you from her. They didn't go to the fjords." "No, before they went to the fjords, they didn't know that His Highness Roland had already established a foothold in the western region. They didn't contact each other until they settled on Sleeping Island." She gave a brief account of the process of the alliance between the two sides. "This time, Lady Tilly went to the western region at his invitation, just like you." "Did Prince Roland really establish a coexistence system for witches and ordinary people in his territory?" Spear frowned and asked, obviously not believing it. "Not only that, but he also drove the church out of his territory," Nightingale said with a smile. "Now there are more than 10 witches living in Border Town, and the townspeople are accustomed to their existence. I never lie about this." The Marquis stood up and poured her a cup of tea. "Can you tell me more about how he did it?" "If you want to know." Nightingale turned around, walked back to the table and sat down. These deeds might not be able to change the Marquis's decision, but it was never a bad thing to get to know each other better. She decided to focus on the establishment of the Witch Union by His Highness, the war with the Duke of Ryan, and the governance after the recovery of Longsong Stronghold, so that the Marquis could roughly understand the situation of witches in Border Town. When His Highness unified Grey Castle in the future, this Witch Marquis would probably not put up much resistance. Just then, there was a sudden rapid knocking sound outside the window. "This is..." Spear looked at Nightingale in surprise. The latter opened the window and sure enough, it was Maggie squatting outside. "Danger. Lightning found something unexpected. Coup. What happened?" "A team of Judgment Army is coming to the castle. Coup." The pigeon flapped its wings and said, "There are at least 20 people. Coup." "The church's Judgment Army?" Nightingale turned around and frowned. "Are they here for you?" "No. I didn't make an appointment with the priest of the church today." The Marquis also looked very puzzled. "Did they discover your whereabouts?" "It's unlikely." She shook her head. "Unless the church has the ability to monitor every bird in the sky." "That's strange." Spear muttered. "If they're here for me, they shouldn't have sent so many Judgment Army soldiers. This is almost the entire manpower of the Fallen Dragon Ridge Church." "What are you waiting for?" "They're about to enter the castle area." A golden figure jumped in from the window and landed lightly beside Nightingale. It was lightning. "Although I don't know the situation, I suggest you hide for a while," Nightingale said in a low voice. Or ask your guards to stop them outside the castle and find out the reason. This is my castle. Where can I hide? Don't worry. Without my permission, they can't come in. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to protect those witches. Spear sighed. But this meeting may have to end here. If you're not in a hurry, I think. Before she could finish, chaotic footsteps came from under the castle. There was even the light sound of swords and knives clashing, which was particularly clear in the castle embedded in the mountain. The Marquis expression changed. Who let them in? Guards. Spear shouted several names, but no one responded. The footsteps were getting closer and closer. It seems that they're here for you. Nightingale gestured to Lightning, reminding her to leave. It's not too late to leave now. We can protect you. No, I'm not going anywhere. This is my territory. How dare they be so presumptuous? Before he could finish his words, the door was slammed open, and a group of fully armed judgment warriors came in. They raised their swords and shields and surrounded the Lord. At the same time, Nightingale hid in the mist and retreated to the corner of the wall, where it was convenient to escape and to observe the situation in the room. She noticed that Lightning and Maggie had not left either. The former was poking her head out of the window to spy on the enemies. The latter was squatting on top of the beam, methodically taking care of her wings. These two brats are so reckless. His Highness must discipline them when we get back. She shook her head helplessly and looked at the judgment warriors of the church. Each of them was wearing a god's stone of retaliation. The dark black holes overlapped and covered Spear completely. She could only hear the Marquis scolding angrily. Redwyn, are you crazy? How dare you bring them into my castle without permission? Of course not, my sister, a man's voice rang out from the crowd. Father made a mistake, that's why he passed the title to a devil's henchman. I'm just correcting his mistake. Chapter 416. What? What are you talking about? Spear said in disbelief. The devil's minions? This is a blatant false accusation. The priest will decide whether it's a false accusation or not, the man called Redwyn said loudly. Father may be deceived by you, but it doesn't mean you can deceive everyone. Soon, the people will know your true colors. Hell is where you belong. Did you make all this up? Spear's tone suddenly turned cold. Or someone else? I think the answer should be the latter. After all, the reason why Father chose me is because you and third brother are too useless. Shut up. Then Nightingale heard a crisp sound and the Marquis's painful groan. Enough. Take her back to the church for trial, another man said. Before the trial, she's still a noble. Don't be rude. After Spear Parsi was dragged away, the judgment warriors followed her out. Soon, there were only two people left in the room. Because of the god's stone of retaliation, Nightingale could not see their faces. She could only tell from their voices that one of them was Redwyn, who had talked to the Lord earlier. If she heard it right, this person seemed to be Spear's younger brother. You've done well, Mr. Redwyn. Perhaps the next time we meet, I'll have to address you as Earl. Is that all, Lord Rosad? Redwyn's tone was mixed with uncontrollable excitement. Can I really inherit the title and become the Lord of Fallen Dragon Ridge? Of course. As long as you follow our agreement, it's even possible, the latter said with a smile. What should I do next? He asked eagerly. Can I move into my sister's room? She can't come out of prison again, right? Spear Parsi will soon be hanged in the square as a witch. This is also the guarantee of our cooperation. The other man pondered for a moment. As for what to do next, I suggest you gather her ministers, knight, and subordinates, tell them about this, and divide part of the Marquis's rights. Do we have to do this? If everyone can benefit from this incident, your position will be much more stable. This will also facilitate the smooth implementation of our subsequent agreement, Rosad said. If you feel at a loss, I can assign a priest to you. He is very good at handling government affairs. If you have any questions, he can answer them at any time. Then I'll leave it to you, Redwyn replied quickly. You'll be a great help to us if you're able to secure your position as the Lord, so the church is naturally duty-bound to help you. The other party laughed out loud. After the two of them left, Nightingale emerged from the mist, followed by Lightning and Maggie. This is troublesome. She looked at the two of them. How did the church find us so coincidentally? Didn't her brother discover her true identity and reveal it to the church? Lightning's eyes lit up. Now we have something to do. You didn't discover it earlier or later, but now. I feel that something is not right, Nightingale said with a frown. No matter what, we can't just watch them execute Spear, Lightning said with her head held high. We must save her and destroy the church. Destroy the church, coup. Ever since she defeated the demons, the blonde girl's confidence had swelled, which was not a good sign. Nightingale shook her head. We can't destroy the church for now. They must be involved in this conspiracy. If we eradicate them, Spear can naturally return to her position as Lord. This may be an opportunity for us. As long as we save her quietly, she may agree to return to Border Town with us when she has nowhere else to go. Hey, aren't we going to fight the church? Lightning said disappointedly. Fighting is the last resort. The church outnumbers us and has a large number of God's stones of retaliation. It's very risky to eliminate them quickly. Nightingale thought for a while and said, I'll go to the church first and see if I can figure out what's going on. There was one more thing she didn't say. If they didn't figure out the cause and effect, Spear Passy might associate this trap with His Highness, which must be avoided. What about us? The little girl asked. Just wait for me outside. The Fallen Dragon Ridge Church was located in the outer city. It was small, with a prayer hall, a residence for believers, and a 3-story tower. It was surrounded by walls and had only one entrance. But for Nightingale, these obstacles were not a problem. By evening, after the believers who came to pray had left, she had explored the whole area. Although the number of God's stones of retaliation was several times more than in the castle, it was not difficult to move. There were large God stones in the hall that could block the magic power of the whole room, as well as some of the aisles. But she could take a detour, or even climb over the floor. Nightingale also found the place where Spear Passy was imprisoned. It was in the basement of the high tower. She didn't seem to be tortured, but she was a little dispirited. She planned to take the Marquis out in the dead of night. After explaining her plan to the two, Nightingale sneaked into the high tower again. This time, she followed a line that did not exist in reality to the top floor and hid in a luxuriously decorated room. This should be the priest's room. When he came back and faced with the threat of the dagger, he would tell the truth. When the 9 o'clock bell echoed over Fallen Dragon Ridge, the door was pushed open. She quietly pulled out the dagger but did not move. Judging from the footsteps, there were 2 people. What a surprise. The first one to speak was a woman. I didn't expect Marquis Spear to be a witch. It seems that we have to make some changes to our plan. Your Excellency, the one who answered was Rosad, and his tone was very respectful. Isn't it more convincing if she's a witch? Things are different now. According to the Supreme Pontiff, if there are new witches, they should be handed over to the Holy City as much as possible without being exposed, the woman said. As for the original hanging, let's change it to burning and replace it with a mass death row prisoner with a similar figure. Yes, Rosed replied. But why did His Holiness set such a troublesome rule? It's not easy to transport a witch to Hermes. I don't know, but I heard that it's just a return to tradition. Return to tradition? You don't need to know too much. Just focus on what you need to do. The saint did not continue. When things are settled here, I'll go to Redwater City. Yes, Your Excellency, Rosette said in a cold voice. Who is this person? Why does the priest not even dare to breathe loudly in front of her? And from their conversation, it seems that they did not know that the Marquis was a witch before they arrested Spear Passy. Is it a conspiracy against the Lord of Fallen Dragon Ridge? Nightingale could not help but walk out of her hiding place and look at the saint with the help of the mist. To her surprise, the saint was not wearing a God's stone of retaliation. In the black and white world, the magic power in the saint's body was as eye-catching as fluorescent light. This person is a witch. Who's there? Nightingale reacted quickly. Almost in an instant, a dazzling silver light pierced towards Nightingale. Chapter 417. Years of accumulated combat experience played a role. Nightingale's brain did not have time to think, but her body had already reacted. She subconsciously leaned back, and the silver light passed by her cheek. Even in the mist, she could feel the power contained in this light, which was hot and violent. It was definitely not something ordinary could have. After avoiding the sudden attack, Nightingale took advantage of the momentum and rolled away from the other side. What happened, Lord Holy Messenger? Rosette asked in panic. It seems that a mouse has sneaked in, the witch licked her lips. Find a safe place to squat, and be careful not to get involved. You mean, there's a witch here? The priest's expression changed. I'll go and call the Judgment Warriors. No, I haven't personally hunted a witch for a long time. It's rare to have such an opportunity. How can I leave it to others? You just need to stay on the side and watch. While the two were talking, Nightingale was also looking at the woman called the Saint. Although she knew that the church was probably secretly raising witches, when she really confirmed it, she still felt extremely sad. This witch had completely become a part of the church, and may even be in a high position. From the other side's words, it could be heard that she was full of interest in hunting witches, and did not regard herself as one of her own kind. Nightingale could not help but think of the raiders she met at the dock on the outskirts of King City, who did not hesitate to stab Vendi with her dagger. These people could no longer be regarded as the same kind, and they had already embarked on a completely different path. Thinking of this, she no longer hesitated and pulled out the revolver from her waist. Even if she did not like this kind of battle, she had no other choice. Sometimes only killing could stop killing. Where do you come from? The saint turned her head and looked at the place where Nightingale was standing. The priest can't see you, which means that you have the ability to hide yourself. You can avoid my attack, which means that you have received combat training, or have personally experienced hundreds of battles. Either way, for a wild witch, it's rare and precious. Where I come from, what does it have to do with you? Nightingale said coldly. She noticed that the man's face was covered with a ribbon that completely covered his eyes. It was an attire that only blind people would wear. The silver whip in the saint's hand did not disappear. It was still entrenched beside her, and the sharp end was like a raised snake head, shaking at her. In the mist, only magic had color. Did she rely on this strange whip to determine her position? There are some things you may not know. The church has crowned a new pope. He is tolerant and compassionate. He believes that wild witches also have the value to be redeemed. As long as you are willing to serve God, the church can wash away your sins and accept you as a pure one. The saint put her hand on her chest and said, "This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for you. If you don't come here alone and no other fallen witches, you can take them to the holy city of Hermes to welcome your new life." Is that so? It sounds pretty good, Nightingale sneered twice. But if there really is a so-called sin after awakening as a witch, and you have a way to get rid of it, then why did you only set this rule now? Why didn't you save those lost sisters from the beginning? Do you think I'm a 3-year-old child who has never seen a shameless lie? She took a deep breath and said word by word, "I am not guilty." At the same time, Nightingale left the mist and pulled the trigger. The gun barrel burst into flames and let out a roar like thunder. The silver whip moved in an instant. The ribbon of light rose up and blocked in front of the saint. Suddenly, sparks overflowed. Then the whip stretched out and threw a small piece of twisted metal to the ground. It was her own bullet. This thing can actually block the flintlock. Oh! The saint raised her eyebrows. What kind of hidden weapon is this? Her voice suddenly became cold. I changed my mind. It seems that you have to die here. The silver light pounced on Nightingale again. The difference was that this time it divided into dozens of long whips, almost covering her entire position. Nightingale used the mist and crossed a distance of 3 or 4 meters in one step. Unlike ordinary objects, the long whip made of magic power could not be avoided even in the mist. She could not ignore it and pass through it head-on. She could only circle around it to avoid it. However, the enemy's attack range was too wide. The silver light flashed, and she felt numb in her calf. She could no longer maintain her balance and fell to the ground. The magic whip pierced into the position behind her like a storm, shattering the stone slabs on the ground. If she was hit directly, she would probably lose the ability to resist in an instant. Nightingale did not have time to check the injury on her leg. Lying on the ground, she shot all the bullets in the pistol in one breath. The silver whip retracted again and turned into a rapidly rotating belt of light, blocking all the bullets. She knew that she did not have time to reload bullets in the mist. Once she could not use the flintlock to contain the enemy, she was likely to be in trouble. The space here was too narrow to be more than 5 meters away. In addition, she could not bypass the enemy's attack, so her range of movement would only become smaller and smaller. She quickly took out another pistol and emptied the bullets. Then she escaped into the mist, passed through the floor under her feet, and went straight to the second floor. She ran away. The saint roared. Summon the Judgment Army to block the church and guard the dungeon of the Marquis. She may be coming for this person. Ren? Rosad looked around and found no signs of damage, whether it was the doors, windows, or the entrance to the secret passage. But the walls, ceiling, or floor. Her ability is not as simple as being invisible. There is no magic reaction in the room. The Pure Witch gritted her teeth. Do as I say. She's injured and shouldn't be able to run far. Ask your people to put on God's stone of retaliation crossbow bolts. Yes. After the priest left in a hurry, she sat on the ground with weak legs. Her fingers trembled slightly and she could not summon any strength. Damn it, what kind of weapon is this? Her ability could be said to be both offensive and defensive, especially in defense. It was regarded as the strongest shield among the Pure Witches. This magic light could block any attack, be it swords or crossbow bolts, but it was impossible to pass through the barrier formed by it. In order to strengthen her ability, she always kept her magic light activated. After more than 10 years, the magic power that her body could hold had become very large. Even if an ordinary crossbow shot hundreds of arrows, it would not be of any use. She would never run out of magic power to defend against flying arrows. However, her opponent's instantaneous attack had drained all of her mana. Now, she could not even maintain her ability, and her body felt extremely exhausted. This feeling of weakness and powerlessness had not appeared for many years. The saint thought bitterly, I must catch this fallen one, dead or alive. Chapter 4:18. Nightingale followed the route she had figured out earlier, passed through the roof of the 3rd floor, and landed directly in the dungeon where the Marquis was imprisoned. Spear Passy heard the noise and looked up. Her eyes widened. You! Where did you come from? She made a shushing gesture and limped out of the iron gate. There were 2 guards standing in the hallway. Judging from their attire, they should be believers of the church. She used the mist to step behind the 2 men, pulled out her dagger and quickly slit their throats. The 2 men did not expect that someone could attack them from inside the prison. They did not even turn around to look at her until they died. Back in the dungeon, Nightingale finally had a chance to check her injuries. She saw that Soroya's specially made windproof pants had been cut open, and her calf was bleeding profusely. The wound was almost as deep as a fingernail. The enemy's magic whip had probably pierced through the pants from the side and taken away a piece of flesh. Fortunately, it didn't hurt her bones. If it weren't for the toughness of the coated pants, she would have been more seriously injured. You're hurt. Spear frowned. It's not a big problem. We have to get out of here. If we don't, you'll become a corpse. Nightingale didn't tell the Marquis that the saint planned to take her to Hermes. In her opinion, it was no different from death, or even worse. They didn't know you were a witch before they caught you. This is all a conspiracy led by the church. All they want is the position of the Lord of Fallen Dragon Ridge. What about my brother? He's probably a puppet of the church. We don't have much time. I'll explain it to you on the way. Nightingale tied the wound with the gauze she brought with her. Where's the god's locket of retribution? The Marquis pointed to her neck. At first, it was just a chain tied to my feet. Later, they changed it to this. Damn it. Nightingale's heart sank. She saw a metal ring as thick as a thumb tied around the Marquis's neck. The god's locket of retribution was made by stuffing several god stones into the iron ring and then closing it with a special tool. It was extremely difficult to unlock it with one's own strength. Do you remember which room the locking tool was kept in? The cell at the entrance. They locked the place where they took me. Apparently, after discovering her true identity, the saint had switched to the safest shackles, which could trap almost all witches except the extraordinary. If he wanted to take Spear away, he had to remove this thing first, or else he wouldn't be able to pull her into the mist state. Let's go to the first cell, Nightingale decided. You come with me. Enduring the stinging pain in her leg, she once again returned to the fallen guard, took the key and opened the cell door. At this moment, a crisp bell rang from the top of the tower. The urgent sound echoed in the silent building, as if it was pounding on her heart. It's the church's alarm, Spear said, her expression changing. They'll come sooner or later, Nightingale said in a low voice. Only by moving faster than the enemy can we have a chance to survive. In a sense, the alarm at this time helped her. The believers stationed in the basement heard the bell and all gathered at the only exit of the prison. This undoubtedly gave Nightingale a chance to catch them all in one fell swoop. She descended from the fog, aimed at these people, and pulled the trigger. Several bullets hit the first target and pierced through his body, then directly into the body of the second person, splattering a large amount of blood. The god's stones of retaliation they wore were the most eye-catching targets in the black and white world. Facing the elusive Nightingale, these people held swords and shields, but they didn't know where to attack. After 2 rounds of shooting, there was no living guard left in the prison. But she knew that these were just the lowest-level believers of the church. Soon, the fully armed Judgment Army would arrive, and if they couldn't remove the god's stones of retaliation by then, it would be difficult for them to escape. Come here. She quickly found the locking tool. It was an iron tool set up against the wall, with 2 rusty calipers sticking out. At first glance, it looked like a horrible instrument of torture. Spear put her neck on the caliper, and Nightingale pulled the iron bolt and shook the handle. With the help of the belt, the caliper separated and opened a gap in the god's lock of retaliation. At the same time, the sound of the shaking armor of the Judgment Army appeared at the entrance of the dungeon. There they are, someone shouted. Aim and shoot. Go. Nightingale pulled Spear into the mist, but a mass of black holes shot at her and instantly tore the mist into pieces. There were god's stones of retaliation on the bolts. Nightingale felt cold sweat on her forehead. After getting rid of the cover, they were completely exposed to the Judgment Warriors. She had to admit that the training these Judgment Warriors received was very different from that of ordinary believers. In the first round of shooting, they only shot the bolts roughly in the direction of the passage so that the anti-magic effect of the god's stone could block the way. Only half of them participated in the first round of shooting. The other half were waiting for the moment when the witches showed up. With a clear target in mind, the second round of shooting came in no time. Hearing the buzzing of the loosened bolts behind her, Nightingale pulled the Marquis in front of her and shouted, "Lower your head." A piercing pain came from her back. She didn't know how many bolts had hit her. The pain spread like fire, but she didn't stop for even a moment. Rounding the corner of the cell, Nightingale felt a salty taste in her mouth. The pain probably made her bite her lip. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," the Marquis said in a daze. You blocked the bolts for me? You'd be dead if they hit you, but it won't hurt me if they hit me." Nightingale touched her back and found that none of the bolts had pierced through Soroya's windbreaker. Although her back felt like it was on fire, as long as the bolts didn't penetrate her body, they would only bruise at most. More importantly, the powder of the god's stone would not seep into her body. The Judgment Warriors hurriedly chased after them. They probably did not expect the 2 of them to be able to block the second wave of crossbow bolts without a shield. When they stopped to shoot, the distance between the 2 of them had already increased. Freed from the restraint of the god's stone of retaliation, Nightingale grabbed Spear, unfolded the mist, and rushed up along the ever-changing lines. They passed through the floor and the soil to the outside of the tower. Then, she took out a bamboo tube from her waist bag and pulled the fuse. A dazzling red light burst out of the bamboo tube and rushed into the sky. Then it exploded into a circle of dense light spots, as if there were countless stars in the sky. She remembered that when His Highness gave this to her, he had said that a cloud-piercing arrow would bring thousands of troops. Now she didn't need thousands of troops. She just hoped that Maggie could see this signal. Soon, a huge shadow fell from the sky. Maggie landed next to the tower with great force. Her burly body directly crushed the wall, and the air flow from her wings blew away the surrounding fog. Well, what is this? Spear Passy couldn't help but widen her eyes. My companion. Nightingale asked Lightning to help fix the Marquis to Maggie. She used the last of her strength to climb onto Maggie's back and patted Maggie's rough body. Take off. Ow, ow. Maggie roared at the Judgment Warriors who were chasing after them. Then she flapped her wings and soared into the sky. Carrying the two of them, they soon disappeared into the night sky. Chapter 419. On the ridge of Fallen Dragon Ridge, Lightning found a leeward place and skillfully set up a tent that could accommodate 4 people. The burning bonfire dispelled the cold. Nightingale rolled up her trousers, revealing her blood-stained calf, which was swollen from where she had been hit by the saint. She hadn't felt anything when she had been running with her teeth clenched, but now that she had relaxed, she found it extremely difficult to move her legs. If Maggie hadn't arrived in time, she really didn't know how far she could have run with the Marquis. It was extremely dangerous to walk through the fog when it was difficult to move. Those ever-changing lines were not only stairs but also sharp blades, which could easily cut one into pieces if one didn't grasp them well. Let me help you, Koo. Maggie rummaged through her big backpack and found a pile of first aid supplies. In addition to cotton cloth and a small bottle of alcohol, there were also some herbs processed by leaf, which were the main medical means in the Witch Cooperation Association. When the pungent alcohol was poured on the wound, even Nightingale couldn't help but let out a muffled groan, her eyebrows tightly pressed together. If His Highness hadn't told her that this thing could effectively kill small creatures and prevent the demonic plague from eroding the wound, she would have thought it was no different from torture. Fortunately, the coolness brought by the herbs quickly dispelled the burning pain. After the wound was bandaged, she immediately felt a lot more comfortable. You're back. The Marquis whispered, Is it okay? What's wrong with my back? Lightning went into the tent with a bundle of firewood. She was shot by those people's crossbow while trying to save me. Spear sounded a little depressed. It's not a big deal. It's just like being punched a few times. Nightingale curled her lips. At most, I won't be able to lie down and sleep tonight. It's better to apply some herbs. Lightning fiddled with the branches in the fire pit, splashing some sparks. Leaf's medicine can not only stop the bleeding, but also has a good effect on bruises. Lie on me, Koo. Maggie sat down and patted her thigh. I'll apply the medicine for you, Koo. Looking at the white-haired girl's serious eyes, Nightingale could not dissuade her. In the end, she could only nod. All right. After taking off her clothes, she covered her chest and lay on Maggie's lap. Then she heard the Marquis gasp. She didn't need to look to know that her originally smooth back was definitely red and swollen, with patches of blue and purple, but it only looked scary. She disapprovingly thought that this kind of injury was nothing for a witch with a strong self-healing ability, and it would disappear in 2 or 3 days. While applying medicine, Nightingale coughed twice and said, What do you plan to do next, Lord Marquis? Your brother, Redwin, was instigated by the church to betray you. Before that, neither he nor the church knew that you were a witch. She briefly told her what she had heard in the tower. They should be after your position as lord. Even if you're not a witch, they'll still think you're a devil's henchman and execute you. This isn't a difficult thing for the church. They dared to murder a Marquis in public. Spear gritted her teeth. I'll make Redwin pay for the moderate church. What the church does is far beyond your imagination. Nightingale shook her head. Even the king doesn't blink before taking action. The kingdom of Everwinter and the kingdom of Wolfheart are the best examples. Spear was suddenly stunned. After a while, she said, Is the church really going to annex the 4 kingdoms? I've only heard this from some merchants in the neighboring countries, but most of the nobles in King's City think it's just nonsense. The nobles in King City also say that Roland Wimbledon is a rebel king. She shrugged. If His Highness guessed correctly, that's only the first step of the church's plan. But I can't tell you about the conspiracy behind it for now unless you join the Witch Union. Besides, the church definitely didn't plan this coup in a day or two. Most of your subordinates should have already sided with Redwin, who sold more benefits. If you want to take back Fallen Dragon Ridge, you can also ask His Highness for help. He will really help me? Of course. It's our duty to eradicate the church. Nightingale chuckled. The Marquis fell silent and seemed to be hesitating. Don't worry. Nightingale knew the hesitation in her heart, which was also what most witches worried about before going to Border Town. If you want to leave the Western region, you can do so at any time. His Highness never forces anyone. Did he really realize the coexistence of witches and ordinary people? This was the second time Nightingale heard the Marquis ask about this, and every time she answered this question, she would always feel a surge of pride. Yes, His Highness's territory is such a place. It's the holy mountain of witches. Spear Passy's face looked uncertain in the firelight. After a long time, she nodded slightly and asked, "Shall we leave tomorrow?" "Not for now," Nightingale and Lightning said in unison. Then they looked at each other and could not help but laugh. The church will definitely try to report this news to the Holy City. In the next 2 days, we must intercept the carrier pigeons released by the enemy, she explained to the Countess. After that, Maggie will send you back to Border Town, and I have other tasks to complete. In the room at the top of the tower, she remembered that the saint had said that she would soon set off for Redwater City after dealing with things here. Obviously, every time she arrived in a city, she would set off an undercurrent. No matter how big the influence was, it would always cause trouble for His Highness. Moreover, this person had seen her attack methods. If she could intercept her, the church's plan would inevitably be thwarted, and she might be able to find a lot of information from her. Nightingale took a deep breath. She decided to intercept the church's team of messengers, but she was not sure whether His Highness Roland would agree with her plan. If he asked her to go back, she did not intend to stubbornly go. 3 days later, after sending off the Marquis, Maggie returned to Fallen Dragon Ridge again. This time, she was accompanied by 2 witches from Sleeping Island. "Why are you here?" Nightingale looked at them in surprise. "His Highness Roland asked us to help you." Andrea jumped off the back of the beast gracefully, took off her hood, and flipped her blonde hair. "The reward is 2 ice cream buns." "How can I be left out of the mission to wipe out the church?" Ashes said with a smile. "His Highness said you can do it, but you must be careful, Ku." Maggie changed back to her human form. "He said he'll wait for you in the castle." "Is that so?" Nightingale suddenly felt a warmth in her heart. "I see. How many people do they have?" Ashes raised her eyebrows. "I heard there's a witch?" "I'm not sure, but there are at most 20 judgment warriors as well as their attendants and believers," she said word by word. "I don't care about the others, but I must deal with the witch." Chapter 420. When Lightning detected a large group of people coming from the north gate of Fallen Dragon Ridge, they had already been on the ridge for a week. The size of the emissary delegation of the church was similar to what Nightingale had expected at the beginning. The armored judgment warriors walked at the front of the team. There were 25 people in total. Behind them was a long supply team. Judging from their dressing, they were probably composed of believers and mercenaries. There were about 100 people in total. Except for the judgment warriors who rode on horses, the others walked on foot. There were 2 carriages in the emissary delegation, and the saint was undoubtedly in one of them. The 5 people quietly followed the team toward Redwater City. According to the plan, when the enemy team was out of the range of the sentry tower of Fallen Dragon Ridge and could not get support quickly, they would take action. In the mist, Nightingale quietly looked at the 4-wheeled carriage in the middle of the team. Through the twisted silhouette of the carriage, she could see the silver magic light looming. If she was alone, she might be able to find a chance to kill the saint of the church, but she could not guarantee that everyone would be buried here. Now, with the help of the witches of Sleeping Island, The possibility of sealing the news in the southern region was much higher. Once these people disappeared, it would be at least the next spring before Hermes realized it. Even if they wanted to find out the mystery of the disappearance of the emissary delegation, it would be very difficult. Nightingale didn't like killing, but this time she took the initiative to do so. In order to reduce the burden of His Highness and to make the holy mountain of witches last forever. She did not regret turning into a sharp blade. As the emissary delegation entered a woodland, Nightingale saw a black shadow in the sky approaching from afar. Maggie folded her wings and roared as she swooped down. The horses immediately neighed in fear and ran away uncontrollably. The people who witnessed this scene were all dumbfounded and did not know what to do for a moment. The horrible giant beast did not rush into the crowd to bite and trample them as they had imagined. Instead, it spread its wings when it was about to land and swept over the team. The wind pressure made it difficult for the people to open their eyes. One person jumped off the back of the giant beast and landed on the ground. Enemy attack! A judgment warrior shouted in the emissary delegation. Only then did the believers come to their senses. They pulled out their weapons and slashed at the strange enemy trapped in the middle of the group. In Nightingale's black and white vision, a group of lightless black holes tightly wrapped around the other party. If it were an ordinary witch, she would not be able to fight back at all. However, their opponent was an extraordinaire, Ashes. A streak of sword light flashed past, and the believers near her were all cut in half at the waist. Like harvested wheat, they immediately fell to the ground. She did not use the iconic heavy sword, but an ordinary one-handed iron sword, so that Maggie could carry another which at the same time as her. The iron sword quickly broke in the slash, but there were still many weapons scattered around for her to pick up. Whether it was a halberd, a club, an iron hammer, or a machete, they were all deadly weapons in her hands. Blood splattered and limbs flew everywhere. Ashes had cut the team in half with her own strength. The mercenaries in the rear were also unable to go forward to help, and they found themselves in another predicament. Andrea's figure was like a sprite leaping in the forest. She used tree trunks and branches as cover, constantly changing her position, and at the same time, using every gap to shoot arrows. Every time she shot, someone would be hit between the eyebrows and fall to the ground. In less than a quarter of an hour, the whole team became a mess. Screams, shouts, and the sound of fighting intertwined, echoing in the silent forest. Nightingale did not stop to join the battle. She quickly moved through the fog, closely following her target. There was only one enemy she had to deal with, the church's saint, the witch hunter. After the two carriages ran wildly for a while, the frightened horses finally calmed down, but they did not turn back. Instead, they left the main road and rushed into the forest in two different directions. It seemed that the saint realized that there was an extremely difficult extraordinaire among her enemies. For most witches, an extraordinaire wearing a god's stone of retaliation was almost invincible. But this still could not escape from Nightingale's tracking. She had already determined the location of the saint. As for the person in the other carriage, it should be a priest or a high-ranking person such as a priest. The latter would be taken care of by Lightning and Maggie. Passing through the potholes in the forest, the carriage was bumpy and felt like it was about to fall apart, but the coachman still kept waving his whip, as if someone was urging him to go faster. Nightingale closed the distance between her and the carriage, aimed at the 4 judgment warriors around her, and pulled the trigger. In order to ensure a hit rate, she would always move behind the enemy and fire only when they were in a straight line, and the distance between them was no more than 10 meters. Hearing the gunshot, the judgment warriors immediately scattered, but they were only a few steps away from Nightingale. Full armor was meaningless in front of a large-caliber bullet. The bullet that penetrated through the armor would only cause more damage to the body. After getting rid of the 4 judgment warriors, she aimed at the horses. As the 2 galloping horses crashed to the ground, the carriage that had lost its traction flew out diagonally due to the inertia. It crashed into a tree trunk, and the fragile wooden carriage immediately broke into pieces. Among the flying debris, a figure wrapped in silver light rolled out. Nightingale did not hesitate to aim and shoot. The light made of magic power seemed to be self-aware and blocked the bullets one by one. She quickly moved away and reloaded a new cartridge. "Traitor!" cried the saint, with a roar of rage, and rushed towards her hiding place. But this time, the two of them were in a completely different situation. No longer confined by the narrow room, Nightingale took a step back, and the saint had to take more than 10 steps to catch up with her. The effective range of a revolver was about 50 meters, far beyond the range of a witch's ability. The saint's silver whip could not touch her at all, but the bullets she shot could threaten the saint's life at any time. Even though the hit rate was reduced to only 1 or 2 out of 5 shots hitting the target at this distance, she still had plenty of time to reload the bullets and fire continuously. The silver light gradually dimmed. After the 5th round of shooting, a bullet hit her left shoulder, and the second bullet penetrated her abdomen. The saint could no longer support herself. She staggered 2 steps and fell to the ground. Nightingale did not rush to approach the saint. Instead, she returned to the place where the carriage had fallen apart, picked up a god's stone of retaliation, and walked toward the saint. Her retreat route was completely around the carriage so that it would be easier for her to search the scene afterward. When she walked up to the blood-stained witch, she suddenly stretched out her right hand, only to find that the silver light did not penetrate the enemy's body as expected. "You damned devil, the gods will judge you." She spat out a mouthful of blood and said through gritted teeth. Nightingale expressionlessly pointed the muzzle at the saint's chest and said, "Really? I'll wait for that day." Then she pressed the trigger. Chapter 421. The smoke dissipated and the forest returned to its tranquility. The witch's long braids scattered like white flowers under her body. Hot blood flowed freely from her back and soon formed a circle of dark red puddles. The blood slowly seeped into the ground and melted the hard and cold soil. The air was filled with the smell of iron. Nightingale squatted down and untied the witch's blindfold. She found that the witch's face looked unexpectedly young and should be about the same age as herself. However, the scars around her eyes destroyed the overall beauty. Her eyes looked like they had been repeatedly burned by a red-hot iron. Her skin was curled up and reddish-brown, and the outline of her eye sockets had disappeared. This was undoubtedly caused by acquired wounds. Nightingale gently touched the wrinkled scars. As for whether she had suffered these before becoming a witch or after serving the church, she did not know. But these were no longer important. From this moment on, she could no longer hurt any more witches, nor did she have to endure other tortures. She searched the saint's body and found a letter, a seal, and an emblem from the inside pocket of her robe. The emblem was a circle divided into a cross with a clenched fist in the center. Apart from this, she did not carry any other items, whether it was the golden dragon or jewelry. Perhaps she had never enjoyed anything in her life. Nightingale could not help but think. "Hey, look what I caught." Lightning's voice came from midair. She looked up and saw the little girl flying over with a struggling man in her hand and then throwing him to the ground. The man uttered a painful groan and rolled twice. He seemed to want to get up, but his hands and feet were tied, so he could only helplessly twist back and forth on the ground. Judging by the man's attire, he should be the priest sitting in the other carriage. "Where's Maggie?" She guided Ashes to chase the fleeing Judgment army. Lightning walked to the side of the saint. "Is this the witch trained by the church?" "Yes," Nightingale whispered. "She won't hunt us anymore." Looking at her, it's hard to believe that she sees us as enemies that must be killed. The little girl sighed. If it wasn't for the church, none of this would have happened. Nightingale looked coldly at the captured man. When the latter saw the witch lying in a pool of blood, his eyes immediately widened and he tried to say something, but he couldn't because of the cloth in his mouth. She pulled out the cloth. "What do you have to say for yourself?" "Ahem. You killed Bishop Tayfun's pure witch. You audacious devils, sooner or later you'll be hung at the city gate by the church and fed to the crows." "Even if we didn't kill her, being caught by the church won't be any better," Nightingale said. "And compared to that, you should worry about your own situation first." "Even if I die, I will be redeemed by the gods, but you will only sink into hell and suffer eternal torment," he shouted. "That's why I gagged him." Lightning spread out her hands. Nightingale stuffed the cloth back and said, Let His Highness deal with him. I heard from him that Iron Axe is very good at interrogating people like this. It was already afternoon when Maggie arrived with the 2 sleeping island witches. Ashes jumped down from the back of the giant beast and landed beside Nightingale. Are you hurt? Not bad. She shook her head. What about you? Of course, none of them escaped, Ashes said with a proud smile. She's dead? After landing, Andrea looked at the saint and said, I thought you would spare her life. The enemy is a witch. Any hesitation and carelessness are extremely dangerous. Ashes curled her lips. If it were me, I wouldn't have let her live. Tisk tik. You don't have the slightest mercy for your own kind. She's not our own kind. She's a puppet controlled by the church. The extraordinary said carelessly. Besides, sometimes our own kind is much crueler than the other worldlings. At least I've never seen demonic beasts or demons imprison people and repeatedly torture them for years. After saying that, she took off her blood-stained gloves and put her hand in front of Nightingale. Your actions and performance are admirable. You did the right thing. The latter stared at her for a moment and then took the hand. Thank you. Even a person like her can comfort me, Nightingale thought. She probably doesn't want me to feel that killing a witch is too much of a burden. Lightning also put her hand in front of Andreas. I think this victory is worth celebrating. Then Maggie said, Coo! Andrea rolled her eyes and put her hand in front of everyone's. I have to say, if it's just your hand, I don't want to touch it at all. This is for Nightingale's sake. But Ashes raised her eyebrows. Then, the 5 of them raised their hands to the sky at the same time, like a sturdy tower standing in the cold wind. In addition to collecting the information carried by the emissary delegation, they also needed to bury the traces left by the battle. The group of people busied themselves in the forest for 2 days to deal with these trivial matters. By the time they returned to Border Town, it was already 3 days later. When they landed in the castle's back garden, Nightingale was immediately surrounded by her sisters. I heard you were injured? Where's the wound? Nana shouted. She's been waiting for you for a long time. Why did she come back so late? Lily complained. Do you feel pain now? Lucia asked eagerly. This batch of herbs was specially made by me. It can stop bleeding and reduce swelling. The effect should be good, right? Leaf laughed. You were too careless. You dared to run into the church alone. I'm afraid you won't be so lucky next time. This was Vendy's voice. Forget it. It's good that you came back safely. This was Scroll's voice. Looking at their concern, Nightingale sincerely felt a surge of warmth from the bottom of her heart. She didn't know what kind of life the church's witches lived, but she knew what kind of scene the witch union was. There was no doubt that this was a place that was worth sacrificing everything for. Then she saw His Highness Roland. Lightning had already thrown herself into his arms, sticking to him like a gecko. Maggie also flew over and lay on Roland's shoulder, rubbing his cheek. Although Nightingale also wanted to do the same, she knew that she was no longer a child. She resisted the urge to hug him, walked in front of His Highness, and said with a smile, I'm back. Well, I've been waiting for you for a long time. The prince's smile was still as familiar as ever. Take a hot bath first and have a good rest. I put several bags of honey-grilled fish in the office drawer. Well, I won't be polite. Nightingale raised the corner of her mouth. She was once again convinced that what she was doing was right. Chapter 422. That night, Roland held a grand banquet in the Lord's castle. This was the first time that the Witch Union had initiated an attack on the church. In addition to rescuing Spear Passy, they also captured Priest Hermes. When the 5 witches who had participated in the battle stepped onto the stage, the hall burst into applause. Roland, who rarely drank 2 glasses of Evelyn's special iced white wine with fruit juice. Although it was only a small victory, the long months of the demons itself made people nervous, so he also hoped to take this opportunity to relax everyone's mood. The next day, when Roland walked into the office, rubbing his dizzy head, Nightingale was already sitting cross-legged on the table, waiting. Don't you need to rest? He asked with a smile. Ever since he agreed to intercept the emissary delegation, he had never really felt at ease. Even though he knew that once they entered the open area, her mist ability would make her invincible, he was still worried about accidents. After all, this was not a daily practice, but a real battle of life and death. Now that he saw her in high spirits, he suddenly felt much better. Nightingale swallowed the dried fish and said, "Of course not. I've recovered to my best state." As soon as Roland sat back in his seat, she jumped off the table, went around the back of the chair and hugged him. "If I rest for one more day, I won't have to see you for one more day." The prince was slightly stunned. "Actually, I wanted to do that in the castle garden yesterday, but it doesn't matter now," Nightingale whispered in his ear. She didn't let go of him until she heard footsteps outside the office. She then disappeared into the mist. "Your Highness," the guard shouted, "Marquis Passy, the Lord of Fallen Dragon Ridge, is here to see you." "Let her in." Roland cleared his throat and straightened his posture. Spear Passy walked into the office, bowed, and then sat in front of the table. "I've carefully considered your requirements. What do you think?" He poured her a cup of tea. While Nightingale, Ashes and the others were fighting the church, he had not been idle. Other than bringing the Marquis around the town, he had also held many discussions with her. During that time, Roland briefly explained the crisis that the kingdom was about to face, the origins of the church, and the threat of the devil. He also told her about his plans for the future. When Spear heard the origin of the church and the reason for hunting witches, she was so shocked that her eyes almost popped out. If it weren't for Tilly and Agatha's testimonies, she probably wouldn't have believed that witches had once ruled the entire barbarian land. But since then, her attitude had changed a lot. Taking back the power of enfeoffment, implementing the same laws and administrative system, not inheriting positions and not selling. "I can accept these requests, but..." She paused. "I'm just curious, do you really intend to promote them to the whole territory?" "That's right. If we don't do this, Grey Castle will just be a pile of loose sand." Roland nodded. "Before the arrival of the final enemy, I have to gather as much power as possible. By doing this, you'll be offending all the nobles," Spear said slowly. "Especially the non-inheriting of positions. If I understand correctly, being the lord of a territory is also a kind of position. In this way, your identity as the rebel king will be confirmed. So I never expect them to take the initiative to give in." He tapped the table lightly. "Before the fateful battle of divine will, the resistance of the nobles isn't the most important thing to consider. Besides, I'm not trying to kill them all. As long as these people can integrate into the new system and even keep their own territories, they'll only lose the power of enfeoffment. I believe they'll make a wise choice. Centralization of power was a system that could only be achieved when the central government had absolute power. If the local forces were too strong, not to mention centralization of power, even his position could be overthrown at any time. Unlike a year ago, the town now had the power to change. When this step was completed, Grey Castle would only have one real ruler, and that would be himself. "It seems that you've made up your mind." Spear sighed. "If I don't accept it, I'll be overthrown by your army. In this plan, what I lack the most is manpower," Roland said sincerely. "Especially managers who have the experience of governing a city and a place. Just as I said, you did not lose your territory, and you can also openly appear in front of the people as a witch. You will no longer be threatened by the church." The Marquis was silent for a moment. "I also have a request." "Go ahead." "After you help me take back Fallen Dragon territory, I hope that nothing will change for the time being," she said bluntly. "Unless Timothy is overthrown, I can only stand on your side without any scruples." A perfect answer. Roland thought. It wasn't a direct rejection, but also left room for negotiation. In layman's terms, he had to prove to her that unifying Grey Castle wasn't just empty talk, and that he really had the strength to do so. Only then would she be willing to side with him. Then it's a deal. He didn't care about the Marquis's little calculation at all. If the spring offensive went well, Timothy's fall would be even faster than the recovery of Fallen Dragon territory. "By the way, Your Highness." Spear hesitated for a moment. Can I go with the witches' lessons tonight? Roland was stunned. Those are very basic lessons. I don't think you can learn anything from them. I think those calculations are very interesting. She shook her head and said, I've never seen anything like them in the arithmetic books before. Does she mean the multiplication table or algebraic equations? He couldn't help laughing. Of course, as long as you're willing to join the witch union. After lunch, Iron Axe brought good news. He's willing to talk? Roland was a little surprised. So soon? According to Nightingale, he had thought that the captured priest was a stubborn person. Not everyone has an iron will, Your Highness, Iron Axe replied solemnly. The Sand Nation has some unique interrogation methods, which cause very little physical harm, but are extremely destructive to the will. They can even make people feel that death is a kind of release. He has already surpassed many ordinary people. That's right, Roland thought. Professional spies not only have extraordinary willpower, but also have to undergo special interrogation training to keep their mouths shut. Obviously, no one in this era has such experience. Take me to him. Roland nodded. I have a lot of questions to ask. Chapter 423. The town's dungeon had not changed much since he came here a year ago. Large-scale infrastructure construction had not taken this place into account. Although the houses and roads above had all been changed, becoming orderly and bright, the underground prison was still full of a rotten and dilapidated atmosphere. Moss grew on the stone walls, and dirty water flowed down the stairs, making a noisy dripping sound. The only difference was that there were few prisoners left in the dungeon. With the expansion of the territory, people could always find a job to fill their stomachs as long as they were willing to work. As for the scoundrels who refused to repent, they were all sent to the mines, where they were naturally taught how to behave with whips and sticks. Since the lowest cell had been destroyed by Anna and there was no need to repair it, they simply sealed the entrance and abandoned it. Roland followed Iron Axe to the center of the third floor of the prison and saw the imprisoned priest, who was also the only prisoner on this floor. He was not hung on a rack, nor was he tortured to a bloody pulp. In short, it was completely different from the interrogation scene that Roland had envisioned. He was sitting in a corner of the cell, leaning against the cold wall. His clothes were basically intact, but he looked a little dispirited, pale, and dazed, as if he had lost his focus. Is he all right? Roland asked in a low voice. Not a big problem, Your Highness, Iron Axe bowed and replied. If you have any questions, you can ask him directly. The prince nodded. It seemed that the Sand Nation's way of interrogation was indeed different, but he was not interested in how Iron Axe did it, nor did he want to find out whether it was humane or not. He just wanted to get the result. He cleared his throat, sat on the long wooden bench beside the cell, and asked through the iron bars, What's your name? You're the fourth prince of Grey Castle. Roland Wimbledon? The priest's eyes changed a little. Look what you've done. You've released the power of the devil. His Highness is asking for your name, Iron Axe said coldly. If you don't want to repeat last night's punishment, you'd better not talk nonsense. The priest's expression suddenly froze. He paused for a moment before lowering his head and saying, My name is Enchantress. I heard you're from the holy city of Hermes? Roland looked at him and asked, Who is the witch who came with you? Is she also from the holy city? What position do you have in the church? She. Enchantress hesitated for a long time before replying, Her name is Aurora, a pure witch of Lord Tayfun. She doesn't hold any position in the church. Tayfun? The prince thought for a while. He seemed to have seen this name somewhere before. He's one of the 3 archbishops of the Holy City and is in charge of the church's external affairs. He's also an important figure second only to His Holiness the Pope, the priest explained. Roland finally remembered that he had indeed seen this person at the royal city's celebration. On that day, Wimbledon 3 held a grand coming-of-age ceremony for Tilly Wimbledon. The bishop sent by the church to host the ceremony was Tayfun. In his memory, he looked like a kind old man. His smile was filled with love and compassion, as if nothing ugly in the world could have anything to do with him. What are pure witches? Cainfus hesitated again until Iron Axe scolded him. He reluctantly explained, "Pure witches are witches trained by the church. Only the archbishops or His Holiness the Pope can control them. I don't know much about them." Roland scratched his ear and asked Nightingale for confirmation. The response he got was that Nightingale was not lying. "How many people know that the church hides witches?" The priest shook his head. "I was only told by Lord Tayfun in the last 2 years. He told me not to mention it to other believers, so I don't know who knows." It seems that the church is very secretive about training pure witches. At least they don't implement 2 sets of rules in public, Roland thought. This is good news for me. He had only guessed before, but now it was confirmed. He had one more piece of evidence to destroy the church's faith. If the believers knew that the doctrine they regarded as the truth was just a piece of fictitious waste paper, and that the church secretly adopted the devil's minions in the name of eliminating the devil's forces, what would they think? Why did you plot to frame the Lord of Fallen Dragon Ridge? Why did you want to take her to Hermes? I don't know. My task was to monitor Aurora's actions. Only she knew the specific purpose. I changed my mind later because Aurora found out that the Lord was a real witch, and the new Pope asked us to send the captured witches to the Holy City for purification. Purification, Roland snorted. Do you believe it yourself? If the purified witches— No, the pure witches are innocent, why does the church hide their existence? Because some believers aren't devout enough, so this is the only way. His voice became lower and lower, and finally he closed his mouth. The prince sneered. Where do you plan to go after leaving Fallen Dragon Ridge? Redwater City. What's next? Impassable Castle. Anything else? Only these 3 cities. After revealing the information about the pure witches, the priest seemed to have given up and replied numbly, Lord Tayfun didn't say when we'll return. Before the new order is issued, we'll stay in Impassable Castle. This answer matched the contents of the secret letter seized from the witches. Why these 3 cities? Cainfus shook his head. It seems that this guy doesn't know much. For the church, he's probably just an insurance beside the pure witches. Roland touched his chin and thought. Fallen Dragon Ridge is in the southern region, Redwater City is in the center of the kingdom, and Impassable Castle is at the junction of the northern region and the western region. They are basically unrelated, and neither are they pass or hub cities. Even if the church wants to overthrow Grey Castle, it should be unlikely that they will attack them first. If there were any similarities between them, it would probably be that all 3 cities happen to fall on the border of the western region. An idea suddenly came to his mind. Is the mission of the emissaries actually aimed at me? The interrogation lasted until the evening. When Roland sorted out the information he had obtained and got up to leave, he noticed that the priest was leaning against the wall, motionless like a living corpse. He neither begged for mercy nor rebuked him, which surprised him. Aren't you going to ask me what I'm going to do with you? You used torture to force me to say all this. God will see it, Cainfus said with his eyes closed. In the end, it's God who will judge me, not you. As for what you'll do with me, it doesn't matter. Your Highness, give him to me for one more night, Iron Axe said in a low voice. I'll change his attitude. No, that's all. Since the priest had said what needed to be said, Roland was not interested in torturing him for the sake of torturing him. He'll be judged not by God, but by the people. Chapter 424. For the first time since the beginning of winter, a wooden stage was set up in the center of the square of Border Town. But this time, it was not for a theatrical performance, but for the first public trial of the town. The announcement had been sent out 2 days ago. On the day of the trial, the wooden stage was already crowded with people. The expanded square was much larger, but it still could not accommodate so many people. Sporadic snowflakes were falling from the sky, but everyone was in high spirits and completely ignored the wind and snow. When Roland stepped onto the stage, the atmosphere suddenly reached its peak. Looking at the people waving their arms at him, he could not help but sigh. Compared to a year ago when he participated in Anna's trial here, he was almost a laughingstock in the eyes of the nobles, and his influence on the people was even closer to zero. In just a year, the situation had become completely different. With a burst of cheers, Priest Campus was also pressed onto the stage. Facing the dense crowd, his expression changed a little. Probably this kind of situation was not uncommon in the eyes of the church's higher-ups. They had long been accustomed to the worship of believers, and their words and actions could influence the lives of the people. Roland thought, but this time, he was afraid that he would not be able to experience the glory of the past. Next to the wooden stage were the witches of the Union. Their eyes were filled with irrepressible excitement. For them, who were often slandered, hunted, and unfairly judged, this time, their roles were completely reversed. The witches were the victims, the accusers, and the perpetrators, while the target of the trial was changed to the church. It was not that they had not imagined such a scene, but they did not expect that this day would come so soon. Roland pressed his hand down, and the people suddenly quieted down. "Greetings, my subjects. Today, I have gathered everyone here to announce a shameless crime to you. The church has concealed the truth from the beginning. If it were not for the fact that the priest from the Holy City had been arrested in a case of rebellion, I would not have been able to know such shocking news." 2 days ago, Roland repeatedly thought about how to publicize the crimes of the church more effectively. Obviously, the rebellion in Fallen Dragon Ridge could not be the focus, because the people would not care about what happened in a distant small city. The Battle of Divine Will and the Witch Kingdom could not be mentioned either, because the things that happened hundreds of years ago were too vague, and exposing the existence of the demons could easily cause panic. If he wanted to arouse the anger of the people, he had to start with the things that they cared about. In other words, he had to be grounded. There was no doubt that the witches who lived here were the closest to their daily lives. The church claims that witches are the devil's minions, unclean and ominous, but in fact, whether it is the Pope or the Archbishop, they are raising witches, and the scale is astonishing. This is what the priest himself said. Roland turned to look at him. "Am I right?" After a long silence, Campus replied, "Yes." A commotion broke out among the crowd. "Your Highness, is he really a priest from the Holy City?" someone asked. "Of course." Roland cast a praising look at Echo. Moreover, he was sent to Grey Castle in the name of the church's saint. The documents he carried proved his identity. Instead of letting them think about it later, it was better to let Echo raise the question first, and then he would answer it himself. Moreover, these things were genuine, and there was no need for him to forge them. "Back to what I said before, my people," the prince continued. "Pay attention to the word I used, raise. Yes, they collect the baby girls and female orphans from all over the kingdom and send them to the monastery in the Holy City, where they are raised like animals. Due to the low rate of witches, only a small number of people can become witches, and then they are further trained. Those who can't become witches become the playthings of the believers of the church. Know these." Campus raised his head and opened his mouth, but found that he could not make any sound. In order to get more witches, in addition to taking in female wanderers in the name of relief, they even collude with the Blackstreet rats to steal babies. Think about it, my people. If there is a church in this town, not only will you lose Miss Nana, but your own children and children may also disappear for no reason. But they claim that witches are evil people who have been tempted by the devil, and they also drive the believers to persecute these innocent women. Can you tolerate Miss Nana being framed by them? No, Your Highness, never. The square instantly boiled up. The crowd clenched their fists and expressed their indignation to the priest. "Miss Nana can't be evil. She cured my burns with her own hands. I watched her grow up, and my daughter went to Teacher Carr's academy with her. If not for her, I would have died under the claws of demonic beasts. She is the angel of the First Army." Roland paused for a moment, waiting for the crowd to vent their anger, and then suppress their discussion. "So, why do they do this?" This question caused a stir among the people. Because the church needs witches to maintain their rule. Not waiting for them to speculate too much, the prince directly said, "Everyone has seen the witches' ability. It can be said that they are diverse and incredible. In addition to Miss Nana's ability to heal wounds and Miss Lily's ability to kill the demonic plague, there are many other abilities that can change our lives. For example, the water supply equipment in the community, which was personally made by Miss Anna and Miss Soraya. The guns used by the First Army, the steam engine used to pull the mine carts, these are all gifts brought by the witches. It can be said that without them, this town would not be able to have its current appearance. But everything has two sides. Just like a sword, it can be used to fight against demonic beasts, but it can also be used to kill innocent people. The church wants to use the witch's ability to harm good people. Those who do not listen to their teachings are regarded as the abandoned children of God. But in fact, the high level of the church is doing heinous deeds, completely regardless of whether their God is watching them or not. My people, if your children were taken away by the church and trained to be the whips and blades in their hands, then turned against you, how sad it would be. Roland turned around, walked in front of Cainfas, unrolled a long scroll, and asked loudly, regarding the accusations recorded on this scroll, "Do you have anything else to say?" "These are all true." The priest's eyes widened, as if he could not believe that this answer actually came from his own mouth. "I plead guilty." After hearing the confession, the crowd suddenly burst into an uproar. "I give the power of judgment to you." Roland took advantage of the crowd's excitement and said loudly, "In the face of such evil acts, your choice is execute him. Execute him. Execute him." Everyone's voice became uniform, and soon there was only one voice left in the square. In the winter's snow fluttering over Border Town, the people made their choice. Chapter 425. After reading the two contracts several times, Spear Passy solemnly signed her name at the end. One of them was the Memorandum of Unification, and the other was the basic constitution of the Witch Union. The former stipulated that after Timothy Wimbledon's rule was overthrown, she would lead the whole of Fallen Dragon Ridge to pledge allegiance to Roland Wimbledon. At the same time, she would respond to the new king's request and hand over the enfeoffment power. In return, Roland would guarantee her other rights as the Lord of Fallen Dragon Ridge. The memorandum categorized the duties into three categories: personnel, administration, and finance. Although it was a bit novel, it was easy to understand and basically included the matters she dealt with daily. The latter was a decision Spear made after a long consideration. At present, the Witch Union was undoubtedly working for His Highness Roland. She didn't want to tie herself to Prince Roland's carriage so soon. After all, he only occupied one corner of Grey Castle. However, the content of the evening classes was quite attractive. She vaguely sensed that the strange calculation methods would be of great help in the management of the territory. Fortunately, the requirements in the Constitution of the Witch Union were very loose. It was more like a formal consensus and didn't even restrict the members' freedom of movement. She had asked His Highness about this, and the answer she got was that they could leave whenever they wanted. "I've signed it." Spear handed the two exquisite parchments to the table, but Roland didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the empty space beside him, as if he was thinking about something. "Your Highness." "Ah." He blinked as if he had come back to his senses. "Let me see." This kind of distracted state was rarely seen in the previous negotiations. It seemed that after yesterday's trial, there was a trace of hesitation between His Highness' eyebrows. It was hard for her to understand. The trial was undoubtedly a great success. The people stood on His Highness's side without hesitation and cheered for him. Before this, Spear had never thought that the common people would support a noble so much. She had thought that they were from two different worlds and that nobles didn't need the people's understanding and didn't care about their support. But yesterday, her way of thinking had changed. Looking at the people around the square waving their fists and making the same kind of earth-shattering sound, she suddenly realized that there might be a kind of power that she had never been aware of, and it might even be much stronger than the nobles themselves. Moreover, His Highness's decisive judgment was also one of the reasons why she was determined to sign these two contracts. Regardless of whether he wanted to protect the witches or not, at least he was able to punish the thief who had plotted against him so quickly. This in itself was a kind of sincerity. Since that was the case, she should respond. However, His Highness did not seem satisfied. Was he regretting publicly opposing the church? Spear knew that this was not an easy enemy to deal with. It was related to the direction of future cooperation, so it was better to ask clearly. She hesitated for a moment and then put forward her speculation. His Highness was stunned for a moment, then he smiled and shook his head. I have never regretted fighting against the church. They are enemies that must be defeated no matter what. Then I'm just feeling a little emotional. Emotional? I'm telling the truth and exposing the crimes committed by the church, but I still feel a little embarrassed. He shrugged his shoulders. It seems that I'm far from being a qualified politician. Politician? What was that? Someone like an astrologer, someone who focused on studying politics? Before she could ask, His Highness stopped this topic. I'll accept the contract. I heard that your ability is related to controlling magic power? Yes. Spear did not continue to ask. To be precise, it's to extract a witch's magic power for other witches to use. Of course, I can also withdraw my own magic power to achieve the purpose of consumption. This process has almost no effect on the outside world, and I can repeat the process in the castle at any time. How did you discover that you have such an ability? The prince asked curiously. Since I awakened, the Marquis replied. The Marquis replied, I don't know how other witches understand their ability, but I can feel its existence. It's like suddenly having an extra organ. Interesting. He nodded thoughtfully. You should know why I sent Nightingale to Fallen Dragon Ridge to invite you. You need my ability. Spear paused for a moment and put her hand on her chest. It's my pleasure to serve you. Since she could not return to Fallen Dragon Ridge now, she might as well see what the prince usually did. Although she had only been in Border Town for more than a week, she found that the scene here was very different from other territories. It was a remote place far from the center of the kingdom, but it was no less lively than King's City. As a lord, she was full of curiosity. What surprised Spear even more was that the life of the local witches was completely different from what she had imagined. Prince Roland did not control them too much, but let them do whatever they wanted. This could be seen from the fact that he waited for Nightingale to return. He obviously wanted her to return earlier, but he still agreed to her request. His Highness did not treat them as his servants. She knew that some nobles secretly hid witches because of their beauty. Now that His Royal Highness was openly recruiting witches, she thought that he would be more unscrupulous, but she didn't expect that he would be so cautious in this regard. Was he still the rumored lustful and incompetent Prince Roland? While she did not know whether to laugh or cry, she could not help but trust him more. Now that she thought about it, what Nightingale had said in front of her was true. Following the prince out of the castle, Spear met the other two witches in a yard in the mountain behind the town. This is Anna, and that's Mystery Moon, Roland introduced. Mystery Moon's magic power is on the low side in the Witch Union, but her ability consumption is very high. I'm obviously at the middle level. Mystery Moon protested. Among the awakened witches, the prince added. The latter immediately became listless. Do you want me to connect their magic power? Spear looked at Anna. She should be the girl with the strongest magic power in the Witch Union, right? I suggest you call more witches. The amount of magic power has a lot to do with their age. Even if there's a difference, there shouldn't be too much of a difference. It's just a test, His Highness said, stroking his chin. If this method works, I'll call them over. The Marquis nodded and summoned the magic channel. It was a sphere shining with light blue light, quietly floating in the air. Then, under her control, two thin lines stretched out from the sphere, like invisible tentacles, toward Anna and Mystery Moon. It'll feel a little weird at first, but just relax, Spear explained. If you resist, it can't transfer magic power by force. When the tentacles sank into Anna's chest, she suddenly froze. What is this? The tentacles didn't seem to be connected to rotating magic power, but to a hard metal cube. It was so huge that she felt like an ant standing at the bottom of the metal, looking up to see its top. Chapter 426. How could there be such a form of magic power? Spear stroked the edge of the metal in disbelief. This was her unique way of perceiving magic power. After connecting the channel, she could see, touch, and even smell the magic power in the witches' bodies, as if she were walking into their bodies. The surface of the metal was hard, cold, and as smooth as a mirror. She could see every detail of the tentacle clearly. When it touched the cube, it bounced off immediately. "Relax," the Marquis comforted her. "This thing won't harm you." But she wasn't sure if her ability would work on this hard metal. Anna's magic power didn't seem to flow at all. After several attempts, the tentacle finally stuck to the cube. However, the magic power didn't react. "What's going on?" Nightingale noticed that something was wrong. "I've never transferred magic power like this before. It's too huge and it doesn't seem to be a flowing aura." Spear felt her throat dry. After the channel is connected, the magic power should be absorbed by the core. "Let me try to inject magic power into it," Anna suddenly said. "Just like how I used the sigil of God's will. Be careful not to output too much at one time." His Highness nodded. What was the sigil of God's will? Spear found that since she came to the small town, she had heard several new words with unknown meanings every day. Just as she was puzzled, the magic power in Anna's body suddenly changed. The perfect mirror was broken at this moment. Ripples appeared on the metal block, and the lightless liquid squeezed into the pipe as if pushed by something and swarmed toward the floating ball. Then she felt its weight. This liquid was extremely heavy. Different from the previous magic cyclones, when it flowed into the core, it felt like stuffing iron ingots into it. Spear found that her magic power consumption was increasing rapidly. This was incredible. Previously, she could easily maintain this ability for more than half a day, but now she found that at this rate, she might not be able to last more than a quarter of an hour. Helplessly, she pulled out an extra tentacle from the core and connected it to her body, using the magic power provided by it to maintain the channel. When the ball of light was completely filled, Anna's metal cube still maintained its original form, as if the magic power was just an insignificant part of it. Spear really wanted to swallow what she had just said. She coughed and said, "Well, the channel can now provide magic power for Miss Mystery Moon. What should we do next?" "Just keep it," Prince Roland said as he handed a cylinder that looked like it was made of red copper to Mystery Moon. "The rest is up to you." "Yes." The latter took a deep breath, held the bronze pillar with both hands, and closed his eyes. His mana began to flow frantically. Spear saw that the metal block inside Anna was glimmering, and the liquid in the core was being drained and refilled quickly. The whole tunnel kept shaking, as if it could be torn apart by the surging magic power at any time. Fine beads of sweat appeared on the Marquise's forehead. She felt as if she was standing in front of an overwhelming tsunami. On the other side, Mystery Moon's brows were slightly furrowed and her cheeks were flushed. It was obvious that she was also suffering from the impact of the waves. But compared to herself, who was just lucky, Mystery Moon should have been more affected. Even so, she didn't stop using her ability, which was proved by the rapid consumption of her mana. Are these girls all monsters? Spear didn't know how she managed to hold on until the end. When the mana in Anna's body was exhausted, she felt weak in her legs and didn't even have the strength to stand. It's done." Mystery Moon opened her eyes and raised the bronze pillar excitedly. "I did it." "Well done." Roland carefully clamped the bronze pillar with a pair of wooden pliers as if it were a red-hot soldering iron. "What's this?" the Countess asked. "It looks the same as before." "A strong magnet whose magnetic force is constantly changing," the prince replied. "I don't know if it will form a channel with the earth and discharge electricity when it's held in someone's hand. It's better to be cautious about this." Spear blinked and asked, "What?" Nightingale laughed. "Ignore them. Only Anna can participate in this kind of conversation. Then, what's its use? Now it's time to verify it." Roland placed the copper pillar into a black iron lump in the middle of the yard. At first glance, it looked like a huge iron tube. At the bottom was a wooden pedestal, and in the middle was an iron rod as thick as an arm. Then the prince looked at Mystery Moon and said, "Turn the switch on. If it works, you'll bring a new source of power to the town." Mystery Moon nodded, grasped a wooden handle beside the iron lump and pulled it down with force. Sparks burst out from the handle, making a crackling sound. Spear was surprised to find that the iron rod in the middle of the cylinder was spinning rapidly. The problem was, this solid long rod weighed at least 1 or 2 people. How could it spin so fast? Does this count as a success? Not yet. The prince found a chair and sat down. He smiled and said, "The key is to see how long it can run." Spear noticed that the prince's eyes were shining, as if he was gazing at a dazzling jewel instead of a simple and crude iron. 3 days later, Roland pushed open the gate of the backyard of North Slope Mountain again. Hearing the noise, Anna stopped what she was doing and strode up to him. She said with irrepressible excitement, "It's still running." Even without her reminder, the prince had also heard the buzzing sound of the electric motor. For him, this noise was like the sound of nature. This meant that the variable magnetic core column enchanted by Mystery Moon was still running normally. As a new source of power, it had practical value. Roland walked to the middle of the yard and saw Mystery Moon sitting beside the electric motor with her hands on her head, looking at the black lump with boredom. "Your Highness, you said my ability is full of potential. Are you referring to this thing? It looks no different from a steam engine." "This is just the first step to changing the world," Roland said with a smile. "You'll soon see the changes it brings to the town." Every advancement of human beings was closely related to the way they used energy. In a sense, it could even be used to measure the progress of a civilization. From steam to electricity, and then from electricity to nuclear energy, energy breakthroughs usually brought about huge improvements in industrial production. Mystery Moon's variable magnetic core column was such a new energy source. Similar to a large battery, it could convert magic power into electricity. Although its production scale limited its application and it was far from being able to bring about a revolution in energy, it was still an excellent source of power as a supplement to the steam engine and internal combustion engine. Moreover, as Anna's magic power continued to grow, or as a stronger source of magic power was found in the future, it would have great potential to be tapped. The name variable magnetic core column is too hard to pronounce. He smiled and said, "Let's call it Dawn Eye." Chapter 427. The electric motor finally stopped running on the afternoon of the 5th day. In other words, one Dawn Eye could provide power for the large electric motor for 5 days. If it was used intermittently, the working time could be extended even longer. After losing the magnetization effect, the copper pillar could be enchanted again. It was a low-consumption, pollution-free, and recyclable green energy source. Its shortcomings were also obvious. One enchantment would exhaust the magic power of Anna, Mystery Moon, and Spear. Even if the 3 of them produced 1 Dawn Eye a day, they could only keep 5 electric motors running at most, when the motors weren't turned off. Anna was still an irreplaceable figure in the town's fine processing and steel smelting. Although Roland had tried his best to hand over most of the manufacturing to the ordinary townspeople, the production of revolving guns and bullets would immediately dry up without the machine tools and material supply that Anna manufactured and maintained. Not to mention that the 152mm Longsong cannon, new light weapons, and his own ideas all needed Anna to realize, so he couldn't accept her spending all her magic power on charging the batteries. Roland leaned against the high-back chair in his office and let out a long sigh. To overcome this shortcoming, there were undoubtedly 2 ways. One was to continue to increase the duration of Dawn Eye, which required a larger source of magic power or more people. Unfortunately, it was already very difficult for the Marquis to transport Anna's magic power through the magic channel. After the magic channel was fully charged, she was almost physically and mentally exhausted. Even if she wanted a few more witches to supply energy for Mystery Moon, it would be impossible. Only Spear could slowly adapt to this problem. After all, she probably wouldn't focus on studying how to improve her ability during her tenure as the Lord. The second way was to replace Anna with other witches. Compared to the busy Anna, Soroya, and Agatha, most witches wouldn't exhaust all their magic power every day. It was feasible to use the remaining magic power to make the magnetization core column. As long as the total amount didn't exceed Anna's, Spear should be able to persist. She had said before that the magic channel wasn't a one-to-one transmission, but could be used to connect multiple people at the same time. Roland wrote down this idea on a piece of paper. As for who had more magic power, who had less, how much was used and how much was left, he could ask the Witch Union to calculate it. Vendi, who was trusted by everyone, was undoubtedly the most suitable candidate. After solving this problem, the next step was to consider how to use this new energy source. Obviously, the factory could produce 4 or 5 steam engines a month, which could be used after adding some water to boil. Limited by the number of Dawn Eye, there was no point in building more terminal converters. Judging from the current level of magic power, he estimated that the town could only maintain 3 to 4 terminals at most. Whether it was used as a source of power, boiling water, or lighting up the lights, and if he wanted the system to run stably, he would probably have to specialize in one. After thinking for a long time, Roland finally drew a circle on the lamp. The source of power, namely the electric motor, had more advantages than the steam engine, such as stable speed, easy control, and convenient automation, but the latter was enough to meet the current demand for power. He had also imagined some high-end electric equipment, such as the electric scooters that could travel between Longsong Stronghold and the town, or the electric airship that could be controlled by ordinary people, but it was not cost-effective. After all, the operation of these machines was based on the fact that Anna or other witches had to stop working for a day. The same was true for boiling water, which could be solved by a boiler and firewood. Even if he had to hire a few more people to look after and maintain it, it would be more cost-effective than wasting magic power. He wasn't rich enough to squander electricity at will. Lighting had many meanings. Not only could a stable and clean light greatly improve the happiness of the residents, but it would also provide better conditions for them to study at night. Not everyone was willing to go home and continue reading in front of a dim candle after a busy day. Besides, capturing the legendary power of thunder for the people to use would be very beneficial to dispel superstition and improve the spirit of science. This was probably the most intuitive understanding of the use of electricity. Airships and electric scooters, no matter how incredible they looked, were still far from them. Another important point was that the weak light of candles could not meet the needs of night production. With electric lighting, the factory could maintain production even at night, and could even implement 3 shifts when necessary, which meant that the work efficiency of the town would be further improved. After setting the direction of development, to achieve this goal, a series of problems needed to be solved, such as the manufacture of light bulbs, the erection of lines, the power supply plan, and the promotion of electricity consumption. But these could be considered later. Thinking of this, Roland called Vendi. "You mean, we should calculate the daily consumption and remaining magic power of the sisters and send it to Mystery Moon according to the plan?" Vendi asked after listening to his explanation. "Yes, we don't need to calculate the combat witches who have fixed tasks." The prince nodded. "What do you think?" In essence, it was to deduct the remaining magic power after ability practice, task consumption, and emergency preparation, and then break it up to ensure the production of Dawn Eye. In this way, not only could they make full use of the witch's power, but they could also strengthen their practice, which was a great help to the improvement of magic power on the Day of Awakening every year. "I think Hummingbird and Echo will be very happy," Vendi said with a smile. "In this way, they can also play the same role as Anna. But how do we measure the remaining magic power? Let's use the stone of measuring to determine it. This is the common method used by the Union in the past." "Yes, Your Highness." She bowed slightly and said, "By the way, today is Lucia's day of adulthood. Should we gather all the members of the Union to spend the night with her?" Roland was startled. "Ah, if you didn't mention it, I would have forgotten." "You have too many things to remember," Vendi said softly. "I have recorded the growth history of each sister in the book, so that it will not be missed." After Anna had passed the Day of Awakening, Nana, Lightning, Echo, and the others had also passed their second birthdays, but the significance of the Day of Adulthood was more intense. It was a special Day of Awakening. Although it happened on the same day, the magic power bite suffered on the day of adulthood was several times more than usual. Before the witches could master the pain of the bite, it was the most difficult life and death situation for them. Once they reached adulthood, their abilities would be stabilized and improved. Some witches would also awaken branch abilities, which were no less significant than evolution. "Well, I will prepare a sumptuous dinner tonight," Roland said softly. "Not only the witch union, but I will also spend the night with her." Chapter 428. After dinner, Lucia White's room was full of witches. Seeing everyone's encouraging and comforting expressions, she felt her eyes moisten. Holding back the urge to cry, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "I can't cry. It's already shameful enough to cry in front of Nightingale," Lucia warned herself in her heart. "My sister is here, so I have to set a good example." Before she took the ship to Border Town, she had only heard that there was a witch organization stationed here. In addition to wanting to cure her sister who was infected with the demonic plague, she only wanted to find a place to stay. She didn't expect to live a good life here. But she had never thought that the life here was not only comfortable and free, but also a group of people who treated her like family. Since her parents had been killed by pirates, she once again felt at home. "Will my sister really be in danger?" Belle asked, leaning against Lucia's chest. "How painful is the magic bite?" "The pain is unbearable. It's like there are countless knives stirring inside your body," Nightingale said with a grin. "There are very few witches who can endure it. Probably only 1 or 2 out of 10 can safely live through adulthood." The little girl's expression turned cold. "Don't scare her," Vendi glared at Nightingale. "That was during the time of the Witch Cooperation Association. Now, as long as you practice every day and empty your magic power before the day of awakening, there won't be any big problems," Scroll said with a smile. "I heard that Anna is still sleeping into adulthood." Moreover, there was also the first high awakening, Agatha yawned. "If it were 400 years ago in Tequila, it would definitely cause a sensation. No witch has ever been able to have an epiphany in their sleep." "Are you okay?" His Royal Highness looked at her. "Although work is very important, don't force yourself too much. The Battle of Divine Will is just around the corner. My busy schedule is nothing," Agatha said while covering her mouth. "If we fail again this time, it won't be a problem for me to sleep forever." "We won't fail this time," Roland said confidently. "It's precisely because I'm interested in your inventions that I decided to do more." The Ice Witch rolled her eyes at him. "Otherwise, do you think I like staying in the laboratory every day?" With that, she tilted her head and muttered softly, "Even if you don't fulfill your promise, there's nothing I can do to get even with you." "All right, don't discuss such a heavy topic at a time like this." Vendi interrupted. "By the way, didn't Miss Agatha say that witches can get a wish on the day of awakening? This time it's Lucia's turn. Is there anything you want to fulfill?" Lucia was startled when she saw that everyone was looking at her. "Big sister, let's trade for ice cream buns." Belle's eyes lit up as she said, "Just 10 will do, we'll each take half." This fellow only thinks about eating. She knocked on her sister's forehead and looked at Roland. "Can I save this wish?" "If that's what you want." Roland could not help but laugh. "But it won't become much if you save it." "1 is enough," Lucia said gratefully. She could live in this small town and had nothing else to ask for. She only hoped that Belle could also live a happy life. Her sister was not a witch and would leave her one day to form a new family with someone else. If anything happened at that time, this wish might be able to help her. At this moment, Lucia suddenly felt that her empty body began to tremble. Magic power was generated once again, as if it had suddenly appeared out of nowhere and continuously flowed into her body. "It's starting," Nightingale reminded her. Although her sisters had told her not to worry, she still could not help but grip the quilt tightly. Perhaps it was because she was nervous. She felt that her hands and feet were a little cold. "Relax." Vendi leaned over and held her hand. "Magic power is part of our bodies. Should we talk about something to distract her?" Lucia heard someone ask. It seemed to be Lily's voice. "What should we talk about?" It was Mystery Moon who answered. "For example, The results of the second exam. Lily's voice seemed to come from far away. Generally speaking, if we talk about this, the other party will immediately want to stop the topic and divert her attention. For example, Mystery Moon's results. Don't say it. See, it's very effective. Lucia wanted to laugh out loud, but found that the expression on her face was very stiff. Her body became extremely hot, and at the same time, there was an indescribable feeling of contraction. More and more magic power seemed to be sucking in everything around it. Does everyone experience this feeling when they are adults? What is Lucia's result? Mystery Moon's words became intermittent. Average score of 86, the prince replied. What? Is it that high? Look, she didn't even stop us. Your trick failed. Accept your punishment. Go away. Wait, don't fight. Lucia doesn't seem right. Mystery Moon's and Lily's voices alternated, and finally, Nightingale's voice came out, but she found that the witch's words had become blurred. Lucia gritted her teeth and raised her head to look at her sisters, but was surprised to find that the scene in front of her had completely changed. Everyone's appearance became hazy and trivial, as if composed of countless squares, some of which were big, some of which were small, and each of which was different in color. She wanted to scream out in fear, but there was only a hissing sound in her throat. The feeling of contraction in her body became more and more intense, and it began to produce bursts of pain. Lucia could only hold her breath and endure it. The figures around her were already in chaos. Just as Nightingale said, the pain on the day of adulthood was far more intense than the previous awakening. The more she persisted, the more obvious the pain became, as if she would be cut into pieces at any time. Suddenly, a strange magic power entered her body. Lucia could clearly feel that this magic power did not belong to her. It was like a tube connected to the magic vortex. She had no time to find out what it was, and subconsciously squeezed the surging magic power in her body into the tube, and the pain was immediately alleviated. As if she had found a savior, Lucia kept injecting magic power into the tube to suppress the pain in her body. After an unknown period of time, the strange contraction finally subsided. The magic power no longer rotated, but became full and full, which was completely different from the previous experience. She blinked, and her vision returned to normal. Looking at Belle, who was about to cry, Lucia patted her head and said in a dry voice, "It's okay now." Only then did she realize that her body was soaked in sweat. The cold wind blew, and she felt a bone-piercing chill on her back. No, how could there be wind in a room full of heating? She turned her head and could not help but be stunned. She saw a huge gap in the wall facing the garden, and the two windows had disappeared, from which the cold wind came. Through the gap, she could see the dark night sky and the lights in the town. Standing in front of this half of the wall was Anna. She looked at her with concern, and the sigil of God's will in her hand shone slightly. "Her ability has condensed," Nightingale said. Chapter 429. When dawn broke, Roland yawned and walked into the office. He had thought it would be an easy day of adulthood, but he did not expect so many accidents. When Nightingale discovered that Lucia's expression was not right, the magic power in her body had already become restless, which was a sign of magic power devouring the body. For a witch who had practiced regularly and had emptied all of her magic power before adulthood, it was really inconceivable. Agatha came up with a solution. As a former member of the Union who had witnessed countless witches awakening, she quickly came up with a solution. The Ice Witch asked Spear Passy to summon a magic channel to draw out the backfiring magic power from Lucia's body. Anna, who had the largest capacity, was responsible for transferring the magic power, and then used the sigil of God's will to absorb the restless magic power. Surprisingly, the drawn-out magic power directly lit up 4 God stones and activated the sigil of God's will. Anna didn't hesitate for a second and decisively released it towards the open area. At that moment, the sky above the town was illuminated by a golden sun. The dazzling light penetrated the castle walls and pierced the starless sky. Thick clouds appeared in the night sky, and thousands of tassels flowed above people's heads. It was a beautiful sight. Although it only lasted for a few seconds, it was a miracle. Lucia was safe and sound in the end, and she even evolved a new ability during adulthood, which was exactly the same as Anna a year ago. However, it was not without trouble. It happened at about 8 o'clock in the evening, and most people were still awake. Many people must have witnessed this strange scene. When Roland returned to his room, he had to think about how to explain this phenomenon to the people. "Your Highness, Director Barov wants to see you," the guard at the door knocked and said. "Let him in." The white-haired Barov quickly walked into the office and asked without saluting, "Your Highness, what happened last night? Why did the night suddenly turn into day?" As expected, he came for the light. Roland glanced at the dark circles on his face and knew that he did not sleep well either. If the castle did not prohibit outsiders from entering or leaving at night, he would have come to the door immediately. "Don't worry, sit down and talk." The prince pointed at the chair in front of the table. "Have a cup of black tea first." Slowly pouring a cup of hot tea for her, he briefly told her about Lucia's coming of age. "It was just an accident. You don't have to worry too much." "So, this is caused by a witch?" The city hall manager frowned. "Don't think about the demons." Roland quickly guessed what the other party was thinking. No one was hurt except for the missing half of the wall of this dilapidated castle. "But the townspeople will think in this direction," Barov said, shaking his head. "Most of them accept Miss Nana's harmless healing ability, but not the terrible ability to destroy the castle and cause changes in the sky. So I thought of a solution." Roland took a sip of tea and said slowly, "Later, arrange for your men to spread the news. The golden light that appeared last night was because His Royal Highness had captured thunder in the sky. His purpose was naturally to bring light to his people." What? Barov was startled. "I will soon set up power supply equipment in Border Town. Its nature is the same as thunder and lightning in the sky." The prince simply explained a few words. He knew that the other party would not understand if he explained too deeply. This set of equipment can make the town brightly lit at night, which coincides with the news. Is that so?" The manager was surprised. "You can really make thunder and lightning? It itself is everywhere." Roland shrugged. "But you have to remember that this is just a rumor, so you must spread it as a rumor. Do you understand?" In order to avoid affecting his future universal education, such remarks must not be too deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. As long as he could temporarily give the people an ambiguous explanation and direct the source of the discussion to himself, it would be fine. Not long after Barov left, the Minister of Construction, Kar van Bate, also came to the castle. "Your Highness, in the evening. I know what you want to ask." Roland put his hand on his forehead and said, "Sit down first." He sighed in his heart. He was afraid that he would have to explain this matter for the whole day. Fortunately, Kar did not think as deeply as Barov. After listening to him, he just sighed and said, "It turns out that Anna is already so powerful." At that time, it was indeed a very decisive decision. Roland agreed. If it had been a few seconds later, I'm afraid it wouldn't have been the wall that disappeared, but the whole bedroom. That hole in the wall. Just fill it with bricks and stones. You arrange the specific plan. It should be finished before dusk today. I will let Lightning and Hummingbird help you." The prince said. After repairing the wall, he should let Soroya paint a simulation coating, and the castle should be restored to its original appearance. "Yes, Your Highness." Just as he expected, Chief Knight Carter Lannis, First Army Commander Iron Axe, and alchemist Kyle Sichi took turns to ask about last night's accident. Everyone was concerned about different things. Carter was most concerned about whether he was injured or not. Iron Axe was most concerned about whether the light came from the demon's attack. And Kyle was most concerned about which was more powerful, the sigil of God's will or the nitroglycerin. Roland didn't send them away until his mouth was dry from all the talking. He leaned against the back of the chair and was about to take a nap when there was another knock on the door. The last one to come was Tilly Wimbledon. "Don't worry, what happened yesterday was—" "I already know," Tilly interrupted him. "Before coming here, I asked Miss Anna and she told me what happened." I see." Roland cleared his throat and sat up straight. "Is there anything else?" I'm just a little concerned about why such an accident happened. Tilly said slowly, according to Lady Agatha, as long as a certain amount of training is guaranteed, it's very difficult to have the symptoms of body devouring. This is basically consistent with our experience. The witches on Sleeping Island have never had such a situation, so why did Lucia fall into the magic bite? She paused a little and shook her head with a smile. As for the High Awakening, I'm not surprised. Since I came to Border Town, I feel like I can see a few every day. A few every day is too exaggerated. Roland poured her a cup of tea and thought for a moment before saying, I have a preliminary guess about what happened to Lucia. He took a report card from the drawer and handed it to Tilly. This may be the reason. Chapter 430. Results? Tilly took the list doubtfully and glanced at it. She has made great progress. Indeed. Roland nodded. Lucia White comes from a merchant family in Valencia. She has a certain foundation in writing and arithmetic. Plus, she has a good understanding of natural theory classes. That's why she has such good grades. I don't doubt what you said about a deeper understanding of the world promoting ability evolution. Tilly twitched her mouth. But what does this have to do with Magic Bite? According to my observations of Lily, Leaf, and Mystery Moon, the evolution of their abilities will also increase the upper limit of their body's magic power capacity. I think this effect has a lot to do with the level of understanding of the world. Roland explained his conjecture in detail based on what Agatha had said about the difference between the ancient High Awakening and the evolution of the abilities of the witches in the small town. They are essentially the same thing, but the effect of a partial or isolated epiphany is far less effective than a comprehensive and holistic understanding of the world. Mystery Moon is an excellent example. Although she's a member of the Witch Union, she completed her evolution through epiphany, so her magic power level is far less than that of Anna and Soraya. Tilly pondered for a while and soon understood what Roland meant. You mean that Miss Lucia's magic power has always been at a low level, and her body has always adapted to this level of magic power, whether it's during normal times or on the day of awakening. And this time, when she reached adulthood, she happened to trigger an evolution at the same time, which caused the magic power in her body to suddenly increase several times, making it far beyond the level that her body can accept? Roughly, but I tend to think these two are different. Roland counted with his fingers. For magic power, the key points of improvement are the day of awakening, the day of adulthood, and the evolution. The effects seem to be the same, but I think the first two are forced to increase, while the last one is an active improvement. Why do you say so? Because the ability evolution will not cause the symptoms of Magic Bite, the prince said slowly. If there is no difference between the two, the rapid increase of magic power during Anna's evolution will only kill her. I assume that there is a warning line for the magic capacity of a witch's body. If this limit is exceeded, the body will feel the pain of the magic bite. Daily training can gradually increase the upper limit, which is also the purpose of emptying magic power before awakening. Corden? Interesting theory. Tilly said thoughtfully. Do you think that Miss Lucia's magic power increased too much during her evolution, which led to the lack of space reserved for the forced influx of magic power into her body on the day of awakening? So she finally exceeded the limit and caused this accident? That's right. Like Lucia, Anna underwent her first evolution when she reached adulthood. However, her previous magic capacity was already very astonishing, and her vigilance against the backlash was also much higher than that of ordinary witches. Roland paused for a moment. It also explains why Lucia went back to normal after Spear withdrew the agitated magic power. The magic power didn't belong to her in the first place. Your point can explain a lot. She tucked her feverish hair behind her ears and supported her chin with her hand. Why do witches have different forms of magic power even though they have the same origin? Why can the magic power in the outside world only be seen when a witch awakens? It's because the magic power will only become part of a witch's body after she accepts it. Awakening can be seen as attracting magic power, but in the end, only a small part of it can be left. Evolution, on the other hand, is to expand and strengthen this small part of oneself. The wider the understanding, the better the strengthening effect. As for the fact that there is no limit to the number of times a witch can evolve, how can there be an end to exploring the world? I'm suddenly a little curious. What? If you were a witch, how vast would your magic power be after the evolution? Tilly covered her mouth and laughed. Roland almost choked on his own saliva. Although he really wanted to experience the wonders of extraordinary abilities for himself, he would rather not pay such a huge price. Can I take a copy of your textbooks back to Sleeping Island? She raised her eyebrows. Although her tone sounded very casual, Roland noticed that her right hand was gently pinching the hem of her skirt. Of course, no problem. For such a basic question, he would definitely not make a mistake. Generally speaking, the more decisive the better. If we can help the witches of Sleeping Island evolve, it will also be good news for Border Town. Not to mention you're my sister. Then he felt Nightingale pinch his left shoulder hard. Tilly did not respond to the second half of the sentence. Instead, she nodded slightly and said, "Thank you. I'll leave now." It seemed that he had been too exaggerated. Before getting a credible explanation, she might not be interested in this kind of flattery. But to Roland's surprise, Tilly stopped at the door and turned around to whisper, "Sometimes, I wish you weren't my brother." After Tilly left, Roland was still sitting at his desk. Her last words were all over his mind. "I don't wish you were my brother. What does that mean?" "Hey, are you stupid?" Nightingale appeared and waved her finger in front of him. "What do you think she was trying to say?" "How should I know?" Nightingale shrugged. "She probably thinks you're more suitable as an ally than a relative." Roland naturally would not speculate in the wrong direction. After getting along with her for half a winter, he already knew the temperament of this royal woman very well. Does she want to say that she doesn't want Prince Roland to come back? Or is it simply because of my relationship? Anyway, you're not her brother. Why do you care so much? Nightingale turned over and sat on the table. She lifted her long legs, took out a piece of dried fish and stuffed it into her mouth. "And when you said that, I could see that you were lying without using my ability." Is that so?" Roland touched his nose. "So the answer should be the latter? In addition, since Tilly isn't your sister, is it okay to give her the principles of nature? That's called the theoretical basis of natural science." The prince sighed. "Do you think she can't make a copy during the winter months? I'm willing to bet that she's already memorized the contents. Even so, she's still making this formal request to me. This is enough to show her attitude." At least from the perspective of political friendship, Tilly's sincerity was impeccable. He paused for a moment and then said, "And Sleeping Island is mainly made up of witches. Even if all of them evolve, they still rely on the witch's power. But I'm different. This knowledge can not only help witches but also the people. I rely on the power of all people." Chapter 431. Walking into the backyard of North Slope Mountain against the howling north wind and falling snow, Lucia closed the wooden door to block out the cold. Since winter had come, a wooden shed had been built above the yard. Although it affected the lighting, it could at least prevent the snow from burying the place. A bonfire was burning on one side of the yard. Standing at the door, Lucia could feel the heat from the flames. She took off her gloves and put her cold hands to the bonfire to absorb its warmth. "Are you cold?" Anna, who was standing in front of the workbench, turned her head and said, "Come here. I'll warm you up." "Ah, thank you." Lucia trotted to her, and then her whole body was surrounded by a ball of warm green fire. She felt comfortable and soft from head to toe, as if she was soaking in a bath in the castle. What the convenient ability! Lucia thought enviously. She had never been afraid of the cold. "Is it warm now?" "Yes." She nodded hard. "What are you making?" "No, some parts of a new gun." Anna picked up a slender steel pipe with a piston in the middle and pulled it back and forth. His Highness said he wasn't sure if he could make it on the first try, so he had to try again and again. These parts were shiny and smooth, obviously made of the best steel and carefully cut by Blackfire. Before coming to the town, Lucia would never have thought that the surface of iron could be made as smooth as glass. It was like a work of art. Thinking of this, she could not help but raise the corner of her mouth. His Highness Roland and Anna had both said that without high-quality materials, no matter how precise the processing method was, the finished product would only be full of holes. Didn't His Highness come with you? Anna withdrew her green fire. He said he had something to deal with and would come later. He asked me to familiarize myself with my new ability. Lucia curled her lips. What did your ability become after your evolution? She asked with great interest. I don't think anyone in the Witch Union could have caused a bigger sensation than you when you became an adult. Lucia touched her head in embarrassment. If it weren't for you and Lady Spear, I'm afraid I wouldn't have made it to the last moment. You've already thanked me. You don't have to keep it in your heart. Anna waved her hand. Show me your new ability. Lucia nodded and began to drive the magic power in her body. The strange feeling from that night came back to her again. The outline of everything became no longer familiar and continuous, but divided into many small squares, which gathered together according to the color, forming patches of color. But this time, she did not feel the pain of the magic backlash, so she could calm down and carefully examine each square. She picked up a part that Anna had processed. The previously smooth grayish-white surface had become bumpy. Surrounded by magic power, the spots on the surface were clearly visible. There were about 7 or 8 colors, the largest of which was cyan. There was no pattern to their arrangement at all, as if a painter had accidentally spilled a pile of paint on the ground. The only difference was that they had clear boundaries and did not encroach on each other. These weren't the tiny particles His Highness had mentioned. Lucia realized that if they were really the foundation of all things, then these cubes and spots were too big. Above the particles, there was a larger classification, which was called the elements. Particles combined into larger balls according to different rules. These balls had different structures, so they reacted with completely different properties. Back in Valencia, she was still confused about her ability and did not understand its specific functions. But now, she could clearly understand the concept of elements. According to His Highness' description and classification, what she had observed should be these things. After telling Anna what she had seen and what she thought for a while and said, "This may be a branch of ability." Branch? Ability? That's a rare talent. Anna laughed. Only a small number of adult witches in the Witch Union have it. According to Ms. Agatha, it seems that it only appears on the day of adulthood. Once you miss it, you won't be able to get it again. I think it's closely related to a witch's main ability, or it can be said to supplement and strengthen the main ability. For example, Soroya's magic pen, without it, she would need to mix the paint first before she could paint. The same is true for Teacher Scroll's Book of Magic. She once told me that before she became a minor, although she could quickly memorize most of the books she read, she couldn't share the contents of the books with others because she had no money to buy a pen and paper. She paused for a moment before continuing, "And your main ability is decomposition and restoration, so I'm guessing that these blocks of color may be guiding you to precisely separate a certain type of element. Perhaps you can give it a try and see if you can separate a certain color block?" Lucia nodded and once again used her ability on a piece of pig iron ingot next to the work table. Different from the previous decomposition, this time she carefully let her magic power bundle into thin threads to pull those cyan cubes. This process was much more difficult than she had imagined. She had never manipulated her magic power so meticulously, but Lucia was also very happy. Compared to before she became an adult, she could now feel the existence of magic power more clearly, as if it had become her fingers or even an extension of her consciousness. As more and more fine threads stuck to the color cubes, the cubes finally loosened and were pulled out of the iron ingot. The remaining color cubes suddenly changed. The original clear border trembled, and then the whole iron ingot collapsed and curled into a yellowish-green crystal the size of half a fingernail, with a square iron cube next to it. Lucia withdrew her ability and wiped the fine sweat on her forehead. She noticed that the color of the two cubes was different under the magic vision and normal vision. The previous cyan color cubes had become silver white, which was the common luster of pure iron. The latter was still colorful, but if she didn't use her ability, it looked like a clean gem. What's this? She gently pinched the small crystal. Compared to the iron ingot, its size was insignificant, but it looked much more beautiful. This may be a compound of other elements in pig iron. Anna's eyes sparkled. I'm not sure, but I can do a small experiment to verify it. If it's true, do you know what it means? You can separate a part of an element from a complete object, and the remaining elements won't turn into a pool of sand, but recombine according to the conditions of the lost element. Any useless inferior material can be reborn in your hands. Chapter 432. After Lucia came of age, Border Town also entered the last month of winter. But for the months of demons, the end of winter did not mean the end. The heavy snow often lasted until the next spring. As for when it would subside, it was completely up to God. Based on past experiences, the months of demons ended in the first half of the first month of spring, which was quite a difficult period. The second half of the first month was a very difficult period. If the months of demons continued to the second month, it would be very difficult to even survive. But this was only the situation that Border Town residents had encountered. This year's situation had greatly improved. Even if the months of demons lasted until the end of the second month of spring, the stored wheat in the granary would be enough to fill everyone's stomachs. Naturally, Roland would not be satisfied with the passing line of not starving or freezing to death. These days, he had been lying in front of his desk in high spirits, drawing drawings, and thinking about his next stage of large-scale production plan. The entire plan was divided into two aspects, military and civilian. The former included the construction of new weapon factories, bicycle factories, docks, and shallow water heavy gunboats. The latter was mainly about water, heating, and electricity supply in residential areas, as well as the popularization of iron farming tools. It was Lucia White who made him full of motivation. After testing her new ability, Roland clearly realized that the last restriction of large-scale production had been solved, and the productivity of Border Town would usher in a new peak with the growth of the population. This restriction was the supply of materials. Modern smelting was a very complicated subject, and the output of steel was one of the most important parameters to measure an industrial country. But Roland did not know much about it, so the iron-making ability of Border Town was still very backward. The technology was not beyond this era, and the scale was not even comparable to some private smelters of mining merchants. When the iron ore was smelted into pig iron in the brick blast furnace, the good quality was sent to make steam engines, and the bad quality was given to Anna for further smelting into steel. But this process was completely uncontrollable, and the carbon content was also high and low. Sometimes the usable materials could only fill 2 or 3 carriages after a whole day of work, which greatly limited the production capacity of the steam engine factory. And although Anna's special furnace could transform inferior pig iron into quality controllable steel, the output was only enough for the military factory. In autumn, it could basically meet the town's needs, but when winter came, the army went through 2 expansions, and in addition to the development of new firearms and cannons, this amount of steel was a little insufficient. Lucia's evolution could be said to be a cardiac stimulant. Her targeted separation ability could easily remove the undesirable components in the materials, and she could also adjust the proportion of various elements during the smelting stage, so that each furnace of molten steel could maintain the same performance. It could be said that with Anna and Lucia, the level of smelting in Border Town was enough to instantly improve several levels. For that, Roland had asked Anna to put aside all her other work and focus on building the new generation furnace. Compared to the special furnace designed for her before, the new furnace was more than 10 times larger. It was 50 meters long, 10 meters wide, and nearly 4 meters tall. At first glance, it looked like a slender swimming pool. In essence, it was no different from the previous generation of special furnaces. It was still an iron box without any heating equipment. It relied entirely on Anna's black fire to smelt. However, It was buried in the ground and relied on the soil to support the pressure of the molten iron on the walls. There was a walkway in the center, just enough for Anna to heat the iron ingots on both sides at the same time. It only had one advantage, which was that it was large enough. If smelting according to the previous method, just the amount of limestone used to remove impurities would be a large number, and it would take a lot of effort to clean up the generated impurities. Adding materials and stirring would also be a big trouble, so it couldn't be made too large. But now, these concerns were completely gone. As long as the pig iron was melted, and then Lucia would remove the phosphorus, sulfur, and other harmful components, it would be enough. Roland planned to build a new batch of furnaces together with the old blast furnace and the old shaft furnace. They were only responsible for the initial smelting and didn't care about the quality of the finished product, as long as the ore could be melted and turned into square iron ingots. Then these iron ingots would all be put into the new furnace for secondary refining. The molten steel would flow through the gate into the lower terrain template, directly forming materials that could be processed. After that, the steam engine plant would also be converted to steel production, which would inevitably bring a stronger source of power to the town. Roland called the new furnace Star of Steel. Once Anna's manufacturing was completed and the Star of Steel was officially put into production, the town's steel production would increase by more than 10 times. It could be said that the new large-scale production plan was built on this foundation. In addition, the development of new light weapons had also come to a conclusion. Roland found that his original idea was not appropriate. He referred to the principle of the gas-conductive automatic rifle in the future and designed a few prototype weapons himself. Simply put, automatic weapons used a part of the high-pressure gas when the bullet was fired to complete the unpacking and loading action, thus achieving the process of reloading. This work lasted about half a month. It wasn't very difficult, but he needed to repeatedly test whether each part could work properly. He didn't need to memorize the specific structure of a certain rifle. As long as he knew how it worked, he could always put together a usable weapon after a few tries. This was the problem. The assembled prototype weapon was not only big and black, but there were nearly 100 parts, each of which was personally made by Anna. Especially the springs, firing pins, gas-conductive pistons, and other small things, it was difficult to mass-produce with the current level of machine tools. If he wanted to replace all the revolving rifles in the hands of the soldiers with automatic weapons, not only would it be a great burden on Anna, but it would also be a waste of the gun processing equipment that had already been put into production. In addition, if all the soldiers were to be equipped with automatic weapons, the ammunition consumption would undoubtedly be astronomical. At first, Roland didn't pay too much attention to this, thinking that it could be solved by increasing the number of people in production. However, he soon discovered that once the new weapons were produced on a large scale, they could easily swallow all the output of the acid factory. As for the small problems that often occurred during the test firing, such as jams and firing failures, they were not important. After repeatedly weighing the pros and cons, he finally gave up the idea of a large-scale replacement of automatic weapons. However, increasing the firepower output of the army was an urgent need, so he set his eyes on another type of continuous firing weapon. That was the heavy machine gun. If 20 to 50 people were assigned a heavy machine gun, the number of weapons would be greatly reduced, and the two most troublesome problems would be easily solved. It could also be automatically loaded using gas-conductive methods, and its structure was similar to the prototype weapon. After some modifications, it could be put into principal testing. In addition, it could be made a bit larger, and the parts didn't need to be designed to be as tight as spider webs, which was equivalent to reducing the difficulty for him. Chapter 433. In addition to improving the firepower of the heavy machine gun, Roland also planned to develop a bolt rifle as a supplement for mid-range and long-range accurate shooting. He did not need to produce too many, just about 100. The caliber was the same as that of the heavy machine gun, and with a scope, it was a simple sniper rifle. In this way, the production of revolving guns and black powder bullets could also be maintained without too much wastage. During the battle, the field artillery would be responsible for suppressing the enemies within 1,000 to 800 meters, and the heavy machine gun would be the best target from 800 to 500 meters. The enemies within 500 meters would be targeted by the snipers, and the last 200 meters would be cleared by the revolving guns. In theory, there would be no break in the attack. Of course, it would take 3 to 4 months to fully implement this configuration, and it might not be in time for the spring offensive. Therefore, he needed another piece of equipment to make up for the lack of offensive firepower: the river gunboat equipped with 152 mm long-barreled guns. As long as he had one, he would be able to put great pressure on the enemy when he took the initiative to attack. At the thought of the city-building ceremony to be held after the months of demons, the unification of the entire western region, the removal of Timothy from the throne, and the acceptance of the new population, Roland felt that the task on his shoulders was getting heavier and heavier. He even hoped that time would pass more slowly and the months of demons would not end so soon. After entering the western region, the surrounding scenery became different. Otto Luashi lifted the wooden plank of the window and looked out. All he saw was a vast expanse of whiteness. The sky was covered with dense snowflakes, which drifted and swirled in the cold wind and finally merged into the whiteness. It seemed that the snow would never stop. During the 2-day voyage, he saw nothing else. Everything here was covered with snow, including mud, rocks, and trees. If it were not for the constant shaking of the ship, he would not have felt that he was moving forward at all. "Close the window," the captain said grumpily. "If you really want to see, you can go to the deck. No one will stop you." "Has it always been like this here?" He closed the plank indifferently. "Of course. Do you think I'm bluffing?" The captain took a sip from the flagon. "Every year during the months of demons, the western region will be closed by heavy snow. There's no other way to get there except by the Redwater River. There are no more than 10 people in King City who are willing to brave the damned weather to take this route and still have a ship in their hands." He hiccuped. "So 5 golden dragon is a very reasonable price, understand? It's a little expensive, but I didn't bargain when I paid," Otto said with a smile. "That's a good answer," the captain said as he tossed the flask over. "It's warm. Drink a few mouthfuls. It'll drive away the cold." He wiped his mouth and said, "There was a businessman like this in the past. He wanted to get to the western region earlier than anyone else to buy goods, but he was reluctant to pay the extra fare. In the end, he found a group of rats in Blackstreet to send him there. What was the result? The 2 or 3 mercenaries we brought with us were completely useless. They were all fed to the fish. That's really unfortunate." Otto did not pull out the cork and pour the wine into his mouth. Instead, he took off his gloves and held it in his hands. He was not used to sharing the same vessel with others. You get what you pay for. It's the same everywhere. There are always people who think they can take advantage of others. He didn't think that if the rats could steadily deliver goods at such a low price, wouldn't our shipping company be disbanded? The captain curled his lips. "By the way, what business do you want to do in the western region? Don't blame me for not reminding you. This damn place used to produce some jewelry and furs, but now you can't buy anything." "Oh." Otto pretended to be curious. "As far as I know, don't they make a living from this? Are the people in the western region all robbers now? That's all old news." The captain put his pipe near the charcoal brazier and took a deep breath. "Since Prince Roland took over Border Town, the western region has become strange. You know, both furs and jewelry are produced in that town. No one knows what he's doing in his territory. The whole business is almost only in and out. Longsong Stronghold still sells jewelry, but the nobles have their own fixed channels. You can't get involved." "Only in and out?" he asked in surprise. "Although you can't buy local products, the merchants who sell their goods are still doing well. Whether it's food, clothes, cloth, or sundries, they can basically sell everything. I don't know where Prince Roland got so many golden dragon." The captain blew out a ring of smoke. "So you're probably going to return empty-handed." Otto pretended to be worried about his personal gains and losses and didn't answer. In fact, he didn't care whether he would return empty-handed or not. The real purpose of this trip was to meet with the Lord of Border Town. Because of Roland Wimbledon's identity as a rebel king, he could not go as an emissary with great fanfare. He had to disguise himself as a merchant and go to the border. Before he set off, he had carefully inquired about the destination. As its name suggested, it was an insignificant border town in a neighboring country. It was originally built to monitor the invasion of demonic beasts and later changed into a permanent residence. It was reasonable to say that when a prince was en theft to such a place, he was extremely disliked by the king and left to fend for himself. Judging from Prince Roland's reputation, it was very consistent. But the problem was that he not only gained a firm foothold in the western region, but also posed a great threat to the new king. This was what Otto found most difficult to understand. If Prince Roland really had such ability, how could he have left such an unbearable comment and been kicked to a remote place by the king? According to the intelligence, the rise of Roland Wimbledon was incredible. A year ago, he was en theft to border town. In fact, it was more like a kind of exile. He did not have any ministers accompanying him, nor did he have his own guards. Even the knights by his side were sent by the king. With such a thin team, it was difficult to subdue the local nobles, let alone implement his own policies. This enfeoffment was also discussed as a joke by most people. However, only 6 months later, Prince Roland defeated the invasion of the Duke Ryan, sent troops to capture Longsong's stronghold, and became the real ruler of the western region. There were various rumors about this battle. Some people said that the Duke died in an internal rebellion, while others said that he died because his horse lost its footing, which led to the loss of the Knight Regiment to a group of miners. After that, Roland firmly sat on the position of guardian of the western region. The war caused by the order for the selection of the crown prince became more and more intense. Prince Gerald and Princess Garcia died one after another, and Princess Tilly was missing. The cities of the southern and eastern region were destroyed in the continuous war, and only the western region was safe. This was not because of Timothy's mercy, but because the troops sent by the new king had repeatedly disappeared. Otto was very curious about this. What had Roland done to cultivate such fierce soldiers? "Boss, border town is just ahead." The sailor opened the cabin door and said, "We're almost there." "Oh, finally!" The captain tapped his pipe. "Lower the sails and raise the flag. Tell the dock we're coming. After we get ashore, I have to find a tavern to have a few drinks." He looked at Otto and said, "Hey, don't forget your luggage. We'll meet in 2 days. If you don't arrive on time, I won't wait for you." Otto shrugged to show that he had no objection. Among all the news about Prince Roland, there was one particular rumor that he was particularly concerned about. It was that Roland had turned to the demons and was secretly recruiting witches. This was the real reason why he could quickly defeat the Duke and occupy the entire western region. The burning of the stronghold church, the killing of the chief priest, and the expulsion of the believers were all evidence of this. In fact, this rumor was also the reason why he made up his mind to come here. He did not care whether Roland had made a deal with the demons or recruited witches. He only cared that Roland had a grudge against the church. In this regard, Roland was more to the Kingdom of Dawn's liking than Timothy. With a violent shake of the cabin, the sailboat docked. Chapter 434. Since it was a quiet trip, no one would come to greet him. Therefore, Otto did not intend to go straight to the castle at the beginning. No words could compare to seeing with his own eyes. He planned to spend a day or two to observe the prince's territory, and then find the local rats to get some information. When he walked out of the cabin and stepped on the trestle, he was shocked by the scene in front of him. Is this a dock in Border City? Within a few hundred steps along the riverbank, there was a dock area made of reddish-brown bricks. There was a trestle at regular intervals, and there was a sign at the junction of the trestle and the dock, with a number written on it. Otto roughly counted them. There were 26 of them in total. They were neatly arranged, like tentacles extending from the shore. Some of them were covered with snow, while others had yellowish-brown planks exposed. This showed that even in the months of demons, there were still people guarding the town's pier. In contrast, the length and number of trestles of the canal in King's City of Grey Castle were less than half of this. But what surprised him even more was the ships docked at the dock. A line of gray wide-bodied ships that he had never seen before was docked not far in front of him. There were 7 or 8 of them. They had a shallow waterline, no sails, no masts, and the size of their hulls did not seem to be able to be moved by oarsmen. The most unique feature of these strange ships was that there was a huge wooden wheel on each side and a thick iron pipe sticking out of the center. They looked different from any other inland river sailboat. Otto watched them for a long time until he felt a chill on his head, but he still could not figure out how these strange ships could move. Patting the snow on his head, he put away his doubts and decided to follow the crew into the town. This smooth wind from King City would obviously not only transport him. Otto saw the crew moving bags of goods off the sailboat and piling them up on the side of the dock. Several guards in black uniforms were recording something with pen and paper. From time to time, they would pick out 2 bags and check them. It seemed that they were inspecting the goods. Who are they? Mercenaries hired by the buyer? Otto walked to the captain. Huh, mercenaries? The captain grinned. These people are the patrols of Border Town. He could not help but be surprised. Patrols? Wouldn't that be equivalent to running into a gang of robbers? The first time he left the inner city of the King City, he was blackmailed of 2 silver royals by the patrolmen, and the situation was almost the same everywhere. They were the opposite of underground rats, but the work they did was not much different from the rats. The only difference was that they charged more, and often took the money but did not do the work. But to Otto's surprise, the captain just smoked his pipe leisurely and didn't stop them from inspecting, nor did he take out a few silver royals to ask them to leave. I had the same thought as you when I first came here. The captain seemed to have read his mind. The patrol here is different. As long as you follow their rules, you don't have to pay any fees before entering the market. The patrol team's rules? Otto frowned. Even bandits were reasonable in this place, and they even knew how to write things down with pen and paper. Although they were probably just some crooked symbols, it was still incredible. What are they recording? He asked. The type and quantity of the goods. Especially the wheat. The captain spread out his hands and said, they have to check the goods after they arrive at the market in case you sell them to someone else. Here, only the Lord can sell the food. Of course, I don't have any wheat in my goods, so the check will be faster. When all the bags were loaded onto the carriages, they left the dock and headed for the market along the spacious street. Otto suddenly found that his eyes were not enough to see everything. Was this really the most remote territory of the Grey Castle Kingdom? Looking at the flat, hard road under his feet, the neat rows of beautiful houses on the street, and the people coming and going, it was not much worse than the city of Glow, the capital of the Kingdom of Dawn. As a noble, it was not that he had never seen beautiful and magnificent buildings. Whether it was the Dawn Spire or the Sun Reflection Hall, these 2-story or 3-story buildings were not comparable to them. However, there was only one Dawn Spire, and it was surrounded by dilapidated houses, muddy paths, and dirty water everywhere. But here, he could not find a single slightly old house, as if all these residences had appeared at the same time. You look surprised, the captain laughed and said, don't mind it, everyone who comes here will show the same expression. I have to say, Border Town is a magical place. Do you see the 3-story building over there? It wasn't here the last time I came. I heard that this place used to be a base built for mining. That's what I heard, but who knows the truth? He picked his nose and said, you know, some rumors will become unrecognizable if they spread too much. Maybe there's a lot of gold hidden in the North Slope mine, so His Majesty sent his son here. After all, he's his own son. Wait, what's that? Crossing a flat square, Otto suddenly saw 2 huge colorful balls floating side by side in the air, with a pair of banners hanging below. There were striking words written on the banners. On one side, Welcome to Border Town, and on the other side, Join now and you can get citizen benefits. Are you asking about the one above or the one below? The captain pouted. I don't know how they got the flying ball up there. As for the one below, you can go to the east side of the square to learn about the situation. The Lord's notices are often posted there, and this banner is to attract travelers, merchants, and refugees from all over the country. They even want refugees? Otto was surprised. What's citizen benefits? You can work here, get subsidized food for the first 2 months, and get a shelter from the wind and rain. Sounds good, right? The captain explained disapprovingly, it's not that easy to get approved. Several of my crew members have tried, but none of them qualified. The Lord wants them not to be disloyal, not to believe in the church, and not to have a criminal record. Stealing is also a crime. God, which sailor hasn't stolen something? Also, in my opinion, even though this place looks prosperous, there are still many shortcomings. Such as? There are too few places to have fun. There are no casinos, no brothels, and not even a prostitute on the street, he spat. If you live in such a place for too long, won't you suffocate to death? The market was to the north of the square. While the captain and his crew went to deliver the goods, Otto decided to take a walk here alone. According to the captain's introduction, there were many rare goods in the convenience bazaar and the boutique market on the other side. In fact, from eggs to dried fish, to clothes to farming tools, a dazzling array of goods filled the shelves. As long as he stayed in front of the stalls for a while, someone would come up to talk about it. Regardless of the outcome of the talk with Prince Roland, he had been deeply attracted by this town. Just then, there was a commotion in the crowd. He turned his head and found 2 women walking toward him. One of them had a long black ponytail and was also dressed in a black robe. She had beautiful facial features, but her cold expression made people feel unapproachable. The other was completely different. Her expression was soft, and her every move showed elegance and calmness, which reminded people of a warm spring breeze. Her swaying blonde hair was like the light of dawn. When he saw the blonde woman, Otto felt his blood boil. His hands trembled slightly, and he repeatedly rubbed his eyes to make sure he was not mistaken. Chapter 435. Genius in a Second to Remember Love Go Divided by Small? TalkNet, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Please enjoy. The maid placed the wine on the square table and looked at the 3 of them strangely. If you need more wine, just pull the rope by the door. Love Go Small Talks Neko, got it. You can go. Otto waved his hand. The latter bowed and left. As the door closed, the noise in the hall was blocked out, and the room suddenly became quiet. Until now, he still felt his heart beating fast. He stared at Andrea without blinking, afraid that she would suddenly disappear. I thought it was a dream. Belinda and Oro thought you were dead. I didn't expect to see you again one day. After he couldn't help but shout in the market, the other party also shifted her gaze to him. The fact that she could react to this name proved that she didn't just happen to look like him. No, it should be said that they could not be 2 people. Andrea's voice and appearance were so outstanding, and her every move had a unique temperament. It was difficult for other women to compare. However, Andrea's reaction was not as surprised as he expected. Instead, she frowned, walked to him, and ordered him to follow her. Then she hurried out of the market. She probably did not want to attract too many people. Yes, nobles should not shout in a place where commoners gathered. He was too impolite. He followed the 2 of them into a private room in a tavern, and only then did he have the chance to carefully look at her again. It had been 5 years, but she still looked the same as he remembered. If this was a dream, he hoped that it would last longer. Is this your old lover? The black-haired woman whistled. Since you insisted on coming, you should know the value of silence. Andrea glared at her. No one will think you're mute if you don't speak. I'm doing this to protect you. Roland grinned. Besides, you forced me to buy Tilly's birthday present at first, and now you want to drive me away. Isn't that too unbecoming of a noble? Aristocratic demeanor depends on who you're talking to, Andrea snorted. It's not necessary for you. This is... Aotua couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed when he didn't get a response. He could only look at the black-haired woman with an equally outstanding appearance. Your friend? Ashes. Before Andrea could speak, she said directly, Who are you, and why do you know her? I'm Adalosai from the Kingdom of Dawn. He was slightly surprised by the question. This woman who called herself Ashes was too blunt and sharp. She did not seem to be a well-educated nobleman. Why would Andrea hang out with such a person? I've known Andrea, my sister Belinda, Oro of the Tokat family, and the eldest son of the King of Dawn, His Highness Appin. We're friends who talk about everything. It sounds like a story about a group of powerful people. Ashes shrugged. Did you just say she's dead? That's because… Enough, Andrea interrupted. Belinda and Oro are right. The lady of the Quinn family you're familiar with is dead. But you're still here. Ao2A shook his head repeatedly. What happened at that time? In the city of Glow, the capital of the Kingdom of Dawn, apart from the royal family, the most prominent nobles were the Tokat, Quinn, and Luashi families. The heads of these families were the king's most trusted companions and ministers with real power. This tradition had been passed down since the capital of the Kingdom of Dawn was established, and it was still the same in this generation. Andrea was the eldest daughter of the Quinn family. She was impeccable in both appearance and family background. She had countless suitors, including Otto and Oro. However, no one expected that during a spring outing, Andrea's carriage would suddenly go out of control and fall into the mountains. This accident even alerted the king. The royal family, together with the three families, searched for a long time before they found her mutilated body at the foot of the mountain. After learning the result, Ao2A felt sad for a long time. Compared to Oro, who had already started to pursue her, he had not had the chance to tell her his feelings. He had thought that he would never have this chance again. He did not expect to meet her again in this foreign land. After a long time, Andrea sighed softly. It wasn't an accident. The carriage went out of control and fell into the mountains 5 years ago. It was all planned by my family, she said in a low voice. My father discovered my identity as a witch. Ao2A was stunned. A witch? It seems that you hid it well. Ashes covered her mouth and said, you can even hide it from your childhood friends. Andrea ignored her. That's right. After my father learned about it, he immediately arranged for the accident. I wasn't the one in the carriage. Instead, the coachman and the maidservant died. After that, he sent me out of the Kingdom of Dawn and finally lived in seclusion in the broken cliff city of Grey Castle. She paused. In fact, he never asked for my opinion, nor did he care about my opinion. All he did was to get rid of me as soon as possible. So that's what happened. Otto fell silent. The Flower of Glow, who was deeply loved by the people, had turned out to be a witch. If this news got out, it would probably cause a serious blow to the Quinn family. However, the act of faking the accident was also to protect Andrea's safety. As a well-informed upper-class noble, he had heard more than once about the miserable treatment of witches who fell into the hands of the church. After hesitating for a moment, he spoke his mind, but was interrupted by Andrea's sneer. Protect? As long as my father doesn't hand me over, what can the church do? Bring the judgment army into the inner city to arrest me? Andrea raised her voice. He's the Prime Minister of the King of Dawn and controls the outer city patrol, but he did nothing. Miss Nana's father was originally just a baron, but for the sake of his daughter he rushed into the Lord's castle and argued with His Royal Highness face to face. But he only drove me out of my home. Is this also protection? Ao2A was speechless. After a long silence, he asked hesitantly, will you go back? That day won't come. Andrea stood up. As I said, the eldest daughter of the Quinn family died 5 years ago. That's what my father wants to see. Oro goes to your grave every year to lay flowers. He still can't forget you. She walked to the door and whispered, that's just his wishful thinking. He'll forget you one day. Watching the two disappear from the room, Ao2A lay on the bench powerlessly. He somewhat hated his cowardice. Even now, he was still bringing up Oro instead of expressing his true feelings. I can't forget you either. He closed his eyes. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.